This is your before and after story, where your first steps towards a new life-changing career begin. Southeastern College can take you there. We offer in-demand hybrid and online programs with hands-on training, led by in-field career professionals, and career services to put you on the path to a rewarding and fulfilling future. This is where your transformation begins. Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sec.edu to get started.
Betting on sports can be hard, but hiring Morgan & Morgan is easy. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury firm. They have over 100 offices nationwide and more than 1,000 lawyers. Their fee is free until they win. Find out more information at forthepeople.com/bestbets or dial pound law, that is pound 529 from your cell phone, and that is FOR, thepeople.com/bestbets. This is a paid advertisement. Hey, warm and friendly hello. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you guys. Joining me in segment number 2, we're going to have Joe Budzelek aboard. He does a tremendous job over at Stretching the Floor at blogspot.com. He's going to be joining me, and we're going to be talking about a lot of what we've seen in terms of the Northeast teams thus far this season, a little bit on the Big East, the mid-major teams out East as well, what have been some of the biggest surprises, what have been some of the biggest concerns as well. We'll break down a few games that we've got on this Friday as well, and then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Friday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GNN_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM. Name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but had a great day of college basketball on Thursday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Purdue was able to get the job done against NC State. This by a count of 71-61 for Purdue. It was a very good defensive effort from them. They allow NC State to go just 4 of 17 from three-point range. They struggled a little bit from three, going just 5 of 16 from the outside, but Trey Kaufman-Renn was able to be the main man for this team. 22 points, 8 rebounds for Purdue. They win that rebound battle by a count of 38-28, and they win the turnover battle as well by a count of 8-6, so a very good effort there. And for NC State, they were able to get double figures in this one from Jaden Taylor, but turned out to be not enough in that one. For those that stayed up very late night, by the way, Arizona State, they get the job done 85-82 against New Mexico. If you, like me, had the under, this game goes under or over because you had north of 90 points in the second half, so that was rough. But for Arizona State, they go 9 of 19 from three-point range, with Bashir Jihad being able to supply the team with 20 points, and then Donovan Dent, 30 points, 7 assists, but not enough in this game, despite the fact that New Mexico goes 28 of 32 at the free throw line. For Arizona State, they actually held their own down low. They do lose that battle by kind of 38-34, but Nelly Jr. Joseph, 5 turnovers, 3 points, and 7 rebounds. So very well done by Arizona State. Complete domination was witnessed by Mississippi State as they take down UNLV 80-58. For UNLV, 8 of 20 from three-point range, but they lose the turnover battle 15-10, and they get bludgeoned on the glass 46-29. As off the bench, you had 14 points, 13 rebounds out of Kashawn Murphy. You also had Josh Hubbard also supplied the team with just 11 points, but goes 3 of 7 from three-point range for UNLV. Yeah, Dender Thomas give the team 10 points, 6 assists, but those turnovers that the team had, very, very costly in this one. Worst effort of the day, and perhaps the biggest turkeys, were USC. 71-36. They get destroyed by St. Mary's. St. Mary's had been having a little bit of a rough go of it defensively prior to this game. Well, no issues here. They win the rebound battle 46-23. USC just has no idea what they're doing in terms of their guys down low. Josh Cohen did give the team 12 points, but you also had a nice 15-point performance out of Jordan Ross for St. Mary's. St. Mary's just 3 of 14 from three-point range, but completely controlled this game. A team that got completely controlled, that would be Providence. They fall to Davidson, this by kind of 69-58, as Providence does go 8 of 21 from three-point range, but inside the arc, they go 10 of 37, and for Providence, you had a pair of guys, Wesley Cardin, along with Jaden Pierre, combined for 27 points. The rest of the team did not really step up around them, and for Providence, they win the rebound battle 37-34. They win the turnover battle 8-6, but again, just couldn't splash it in the ocean. And for Reed Bailey, 18 points, 11 boards, 4 assists for Davidson. So they managed to be able to get the job done. Also being able to get the job done, Louisville in overtime, 79-70 as they take down West Virginia. For Louisville, they go just 7 of 28 from three-point range. They lose the turnover battle, West Virginia does, by kind of 16-15, as Louisville also is able to win the battle on the glass, 41-34, 32 points, 6 steals out of Chucky Hepburn. That was able to lead the way as Javon's ball did come up big once again. 26 points, 7 boards, 7 rebounds, but for West Virginia, just 3 points off the bench. For Louisville, 16 points off the bench. That turned out to be very big. For Indiana, 2 rough days thus far in the Bad Boy Motors battle for Atlantis, as that was 89-73 with Gonzaga getting the job done. And Bad Boy Mowers, not Motors, as I am currently getting a little bit loopy from talking so much. We did 4 hours on VSiN as well, and we're trying to get this up by midnight Pacific time. But that said, every single one of Gonzaga's starters were able to give you at least 11 points in this one, including Ryan Nembhard, 13 assists, did have 5 turnovers, so his efficiency did dip a little bit. And for Umar Bello, he provides 25 points for Indiana, but for Indiana, they also lose a rebound battle by a count of 42-27 and go 4 of 18 from three-point range. So a little bit less than savory out there. What less than savory was getting kicked out of the game on Thanksgiving, and that's what happened to Steve Forbes. 2 technicals from him, 75-58. Florida's able to get the job done as they go just 8 of 27 from 3, but Wake Forest continues to be ice cold from 3. Entered into Thanksgiving shooting 29% from 3. They go 3 of 20 in this game. Trevon Spillers was able to supply 14 points, 13 rebounds, but not a great effort there. Very good effort, though, from Illinois. They're able to take down Arkansas, this by a count of 90-77, as for Illinois, 15 of 31 from three-point range out of them, as you were able to have Tomislav Ivisic be able to supply the team with 21 points, 10 rebounds. Kasparis Jakunauskas, he was able to throw in there 23 points of his own. And for Arkansas, you had yourself a good effort from Abdou Thiero, 26 points, 6 rebounds. But for Arkansas, they play even up with regards to turnover battle. They lose the battle on the glass, and Illinois just could not miss from three-point range, so that was rough for them. But this was good for Oklahoma. They hand Arizona their 3rd loss of the season, 82-77. Final in this one for Oklahoma. They go 12 of 29 from three-point range. They combined 30 points out of Jeremiah Fears along with Jalen Moore. They were certainly able to give you more. And for Arizona, Caleb Love, he had 17 points in this game. He didn't turn the ball over, but also did so on 18 shots, so that was a little bit less than efficient. For Utah State, if any of you guys were like me and you had Utah State in this one, this was a little bit rough as they were up 13 points with about 2 minutes and 45 seconds remaining, but do not cover right around 6.5, 72-67. The final is Utah State just very cold on this day. They go 22 of 64 from the floor, 6 of 28 from three-point range, and despite the fact that they win the rebound battle 44-40, they win the turnover battle 12-8, unable to get the cover because for the Bonnies, you had 13 points, 12 rebounds out of Melvin Council to be able to keep them lively in that one. Nip and tuck game between Northwestern and Butler, but Butler finds a way to persevere and get the job done. This by a count of 71-69, as for Northwestern, they were able to do a nice job of being efficient. They win the turnover battle 15-5, but they lose the rebound battle 37-32, and Jamal Telford, he was able to slide the team with 23 points. That was rather impressive. What else was rather impressive? What UC Irvine did to Kennesaw State, 76-59. Kennesaw State led all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game last season, but nothing doing for them. 4 of 23 from 3, 16 turnovers. UC Irvine, Zot, they were able to win the rebound battle 41-32, as you had Devin Tillis be able to supply the team with 15 big points in this one, and also saw North Texas be able to put Northern Iowa into a headlock, 68-48. North Texas, they're able to find a way to be able to get that one done, as for North Texas, 9 of 17 from three-point range. They were able to have Aiden Wright just be able to eat it up with 18 points in that one, and then Kent State, they take down Towson by a count of 65-54. I have to go a little bit fast since a little bit less time with this one, but that said, you had yourself a tremendous day of college basketball on Thursday, and if you're looking trend-wise at what we're getting thus far this season, it has been a very interesting sort of teeter-totter battle between overs and unders, and it's getting close to 50-50. Right now, 553 overs to 549 unders. That is 50.2% to the over. Meanwhile, underdogs, they just continue to eat this year. 52.2% against the spread, 575, 526, and 16 against the spread. And if you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, underdogs 188, 173, and 6 against the spread. Meanwhile, over the last 7 days, 186 unders to 178 over. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got in an abbreviated Thursday recap. I have to post this up by midnight, and currently it is 11:10 p.m. Pacific time, so that's why I cut it a little bit short on the recap, so I do apologize about that, but in return, we're going to get you guys a good chat with our good friend out there on the northeast part of the country in Joe Budzelek. On the flip side, you're on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Craig Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Craig Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man as we got Joe Budzelek aboard. He does great work over at stretchingthefloor.blogspot.com, taking a look at this wonderful game of college basketball. I know that he's out there in the northeast part of the country, but really does a great job following a little bit of everything. He's been getting out there looking at so much of what we're getting in terms of this great sport that we all know and love. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at STF_NCAA. Also doing some great work now with the Big East Vault as well. And Joe, always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Thank you for joining me, Joe. And Joe, it has been a wild year out there in college basketball. First things first, I know that since we last talked, you're now a part of the Big East Vault, so congratulations there. And just what do you make out of some of these teams out there in the East Coast? Because it feels like there's been a lot of mid-majors that have really risen up, but in terms of the Big East itself, we've been seeing a lot of these teams from the biggest power conference out there on the East Coast really have their struggles to begin the season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the biggest glaring concern out of the Big East is Villanova. A lot of people have talked about it, and there's really not a lot to add to it so far, aside from just that the tenure under Kyle Neptune just really hasn't gone as well as it could have so far. I mean, so far none of their losses are really, really bad. I mean, Columbia is their worst loss, but then Columbia is undefeated right now. They've also lost to Big Five rival St. Joseph's, and then they lost to Virginia, who's not as good as they typically are, but still, a top 125 team. And then they recently lost a point from Maryland. So Villanova is a team I expected not to be good this year. I didn't expect them to be 3-4 at the start. But to me, there's still overall as a conference, the Big East is still a top 4 conference. I guess the question is how many teams will make it to the NCAA tournament. And really right now, it's hard to say more than 5 teams will make it so far. But yeah, definitely right now, Villanova is the one team that's probably in the biggest alarm and a pretty hot seat for Kyle Neptune for sure.
Yep, and no question, this team is not on the hot seat, but we've been seeing what has been happening with Creighton as well, and I have some major concern with Steve Ashworth no longer being in the fold as well, because with Steve Ashworth, he was really a heart and soul piece, and it's a Creighton team that over the last few years, my biggest fear with them was just having a little bit of a lack of depth, and I think that might be really coming to a head this season.
For me, Creighton, and this is actually a similarity of a lot of the East Coast mid-majors that I would like to talk about later that are struggling, is that Creighton teams usually shoot really well, and they're just not shooting the ball really well. They added Pop Isaacs from Texas Tech, Jamian Neal from Arizona State, really, really good guards who could create off the dribble, but not known as shooters. So just looking at their lineups right now, they're currently shooting 29% from 3, which is pretty awful, and they shoot 9% or 9th in the nation of 3-point attempt to field goal attempt ratio. So they shoot a ton of threes, only converting on 29% of it. And just looking around that team, you mentioned Stephen Ashworth. He's still making his shots from 3, but like 31% from Pop Isaacs is pretty typical for him. Neal is shooting 16% from 3. Obviously, that's going to improve, but he's not a 3-point shooter. So for me, a question of that team is, like, the defense is still good, obviously, with like Kalkbrenner still running the show down low, but do they have enough shooters and offensive generators to create the baskets that they need to win?
Yep, absolutely. I do think that there's going to be a few questions there, but it is going to be fun to see what we all get in the Big East this season. As joining me on the show, we've got Joe Budzelek, who does great work over at stretchingthefloor.blogspot.com and the Big East Vault, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Joe, I know that you do an amazing job taking a look at the mid-major ranks, and you just mentioned one team that has been a big standout thus far this season, with Columbia being an undefeated team going into the weekend. That's something that I don't think a lot of people saw coming, but are there a few other teams that really stand out to you? Because I'll throw at you one, and I'll get your thoughts there, but that said, I take a look at what I've seen out of Central Connecticut, a team that's already taken down St. Joe's. They played Providence pretty tough as well, and they're another team that I feel like should be getting a little bit more love than what they're getting for the way that they played this far.
What's wild about Central Connecticut State is that they're out of the Northeast Conference, which is, traditionally one of the weakest conferences in the nation. But when you look at their roster, led by Patrick Sellers, four of their best players have been with the program since they were freshmen. And that includes Jaden Brown, their starting power forward, Devontae Sweatman, their starting point guard, Joe Ostrowski, and Abdul Momo. They're just a really good defensive team, and defensive teams in the Northeast Conference can go quite far. If they make it to the NCAA tournament, they're based on the strength of their conference, they're still going to be a 16 team. But through the last couple of years, like we've seen 16 seeds win with obviously FDU out of the Northeast Conference. We've seen it with UMBC before, so they're going to be a tough out. They're still trying to figure out what they can do on offense. But Jordan Jones is one of the most talented guards in the Northeast, that most people haven't heard of him, but he's a fantastic combo guard. They got a lot of talent, and they're a team that's built on defense. So when you combine that guard talent, players that could score off the dribble, and then stars who could really kind of explode for big games offensively with their team defense, they're an easy team to root for. Just a hardworking. They really embodied like the philosophy of just like New Britain, the hard hit in New Britain, as what the city calls it. They're definitely a fun team to root for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I love that nickname, by the way. That is a fun one. We're going to need to utilize that one moving forward, but it has been a lot of fun to be able to take a look at what they've been able to do, and it's going to be really interesting to see what we get out of the Northeast Conference this year, as well as there's been a few teams that have been a little bit scattered, and then another team out there in the Northeast Conference as well. I'm not sure if you've had too much of a chance to take a look at them. They're going to be in action on Friday, by the way. That'd be Long Island, a team that, if I'm not mistaken, they won 3 games all of last season. They've already got 3 wins this year. And a lot of people don't talk a lot about, shall we say, non-head coaches, because the assistant coach, the main associate coach for Long Island, that's actually Gerald Gillian, who was over at Chicago State season ago, ironically enough, now a part of the NEC. But I feel like he's made a world of difference for a Long Island team that, frankly, was one of the worst in all of college basketball last season, and looked just leaps and bounds better this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe I heard over the summer he's the second highest paid coach in the conference, and he's an assistant. So obviously they moved on from Derek Kellogg. Rod Strickland obviously brings a lot of panache to the program. It's a totally different team this year with Malachi Davis. He was a transfer from Arizona State previously, and then he was a 17 point per game player, All-American at the JUCO level. He's the best player in the Northeast Conference. He's averaging 19 points a game, making 41% of his threes, just a 6'4" combo guard. And when you get a guard with that much talent and that much size, 6'4", 175 in the Northeast Conference, that's going to do a lot of damage. So yeah, they're an explosive team. They haven't been winning a lot recently under Strickland, but this is a huge year for him. And I would just say in terms of stylistic play, they play a super fast defense. They like to get to the rim. They rebound pretty good on the offensive glass, which is pretty impressive considering they're one of the smaller teams just nationally. But they've got a lot more depth this year. That they definitely have the potential to be the best team in the Northeast Conference, along with Central Connecticut State and a few others as well.
Yep, I'm in agreement with you. I think that NEC going to be a lot of fun. Central Connecticut is right there. We just talked about Long Island, and those are going to be 2 teams that I'm very much going to be keeping my eye on, as Joe Budzelek, who does great work over at Big East Vault, does a tremendous job over at searchingthefloor.blogspot.com, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Joe, as you know, some opportunities are going to be coming for these mid-major teams over the next few days and the next few weeks in terms of the bye games, and those are going to be very interesting. Just laid out Long Island. They always play a tough schedule when it comes to December, but when it comes to more of the power teams, we've talked a little bit about the Big East, but are there a few other teams in general out there in your neck of the woods that have really been standing out? Because one that I've highlighted has been Boston College, and that they're obviously an ACC team, but based out there in your neck of the woods, a team that I didn't have high expectations for whatsoever. They've been a big surprise, and I think that they're going to be one of the more interesting teams moving forward in terms of what they're going to be able to do, both in the ACC and in this final month of non-conference play.
I mean, Earl Grant's a great coach. People talk about Pat Kelsey, the job he did at Charleston and the job he's currently doing at Louisville. The guy before him was Earl Grant. So even though Boston College has had kind of just a history of not having a lot of attention on the program, even, when they've had some excellent coaches back in the 80s with Gary Williams. It's been a program that's kind of been second tier to the hockey program for a while. But Earl Grant's a great coach. They're currently 6-1. For me, a team that I definitely second guessed and had the bottom five in my preseason projections was Florida State. I say that now over the summer, I just didn't trust the talent looking at the offseason, but it's never smart to count out Leonard Hamilton now at his 23rd year at the helm. This is a classic Leonard Hamilton team. They're the second tallest team in the nation per Ken Palm, and that really helps their defense. They're currently top 10 in steal and block rate. And just like really good Leonard Hamilton teams, they're super deep, currently an 11-man rotation. And Jameer Watkins, who Florida State brought over 2 years ago from VCU, is averaging 17 points a game. He's leading that team. He's fifth in the nation in nearly 9 fouls drawn per 40 minutes. So he's attacking the rim. He's getting fouled. He's getting to the basket. He's generating foul shots. He's also an elite defender. He's 6'7" with a 6'11" wingspan who could legit defend the 1 through 5. So he's the superstar on the team. And Florida State right now, according to Ken Palm, is top 60 team. I had them as maybe a top 100 team going into the season. And the ACC, if you look outside of Duke, North Carolina, and maybe Pitt and Clemson, there's really not a lot of sure shots in that conference. And it's such a deep conference. So it wouldn't surprise me if they become, a top 5 team in the conference come March.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on Florida State. That's a team that I did not have high expectations for coming into the season. They've been able to rise up. They've been able to have themselves a really nice start to the season. And that whole ACC is very interesting because we saw Duke take that loss few days ago against Kansas, but certainly still think that they're going to be towards the top of the conference. North Carolina certainly has been a little bit wobbly in their trip to Hawaii, but that's another team that as well that I think is going to be just fine. I think that those are pretty much your Sharpie top 2 teams, but in terms of that entire landscape of the ACC, after that, I think that it's a pretty blank canvas because I expected good things from Wake Forest. They've been a little bit of a letdown thus far. We'll see how they're able to do this weekend in their multi-team event, but I feel like with the ACC in general, a lot of these teams that we were just talking about in terms of Boston College, in terms of Florida State, heck, if Syracuse can get everything figured out as well, these are teams I think could be able to rise up and be able to be big surprises out there in that conference.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's a huge conference, and it's kind of silly that it's called the Atlantic Coast Conference, with the additions of the West Coast teams. But I like Cal. I think they have potential, and it's definitely their best roster so far. Stanford's looking a lot better this year. SMU is growing as a program after coming over from, obviously they were in the AAC before. Yeah, it's a conference. I don't see a lot of bids necessarily, but similar to the Big Ten last year, where the whole middle ground is super deep, and any day you'll have a competitive game. So definitely it'll be an interesting conference to check out so far, along with the Big East as well. That's another conference that's going to be top to bottom. Especially with DePaul playing really well off the bat, that it's going to be who knows who's going to win depending on the game. And it's hopefully when that happens, teams don't cannibalize themselves and that affects the bids in the conference, but it's going to be a competitive conference, both of those conferences for sure.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned DePaul as well, because they're a team that has already won more games than they did all of last year. And Georgetown has been able to win a lot of games outright, but let's call it what it is. They're playing against the likes of Fairfield, what have you. If they were losing those games, then we should really have concerns. And they knocked off a Wagner team. I still remember they scored 28 points against Seton Hall. That's going to go down as one of the more ugly results of the entirety of the season. But how big of an X factor do you think DePaul can be in a conference where we just assumed, all right, it's Georgetown, it's DePaul as the bottom two, and then we're able to go from there with UConn being that top team. But as we know with UConn, losing 2+ games out there in Maui, that's been a little bit less than tremendous for them. And it just feels like this conference is going to have a different dynamic this year than it has in past years, especially with something we talked about with Villanova being down.
Yeah, I mean, well, first I could talk about DePaul. It's like they were going to shoot well. Like they brought in, I think it was something like 7 different players that shot over 35% from three last year on the transfer portal, and they're shooting great. They're 41% from three, 60% from two. But what's really been surprising is their defense. Currently, according to Ken Palm, they have the 10th best defensive effective field goal percentage in the nation with 41%. They're a deep team, and they don't have like necessarily a star per se. Like Isaiah Rivera's playing great, and Jacob Meyer's been fantastic off the bench as well. They're deep, and Chris Holtman's he's a decent coach. Like he hasn't won a ton, but the fact that DePaul was able to get him, considering how bad they've been previously, like I thought that was a boon for the program as well. And they might still be the worst team in the Big East, but the distance between the best team in the Big East and the worst team is just so much more narrow now. And like I went to UConn. I'm a big UConn fan, and it's just a different team this year. And for me, it's the fan base is there's a lot of haters coming out right now after losing to Memphis and Colorado. But I mean, the reality is they lost both those games by combined 3 points. Um, it's a totally new team. Donovan Clingan and Stefan Castle were lottery picks. They were key members of the defense last year, and now they're just trying to figure out how to rework this defense with those two gone. But like when you look at the stats, Memphis shot 55% from three in that game. Colorado shot 56% from three in that game. The rims in Maui are notoriously soft. Like you see, like even like any shot that would hit the rim would kind of have a nice friendly bounce. It kind of felt like some of my favorite gyms to play in as a kid when I was able to, hit a three out of, 20 attempts or something like that. It's a different UConn team. It's like currently the forward rotation with Alex Caravan and the 5-star freshman Liam McNeely they're the leaders of the team. Like that group looks incredible. Terrace Reed from Michigan has really surprised me. He was on some pretty awful Michigan teams the last 2 years, and he's really fitting in. They just got to figure out the defense, and they got to figure out the backcourt. Tristan Newton was such an elite offensive creator for them last year. He's gone, and then obviously Cam Spencer was a super efficient two-way guard. But Sola Ball, he scored double digits in every game so far this season. He had that game-tying shot against Memphis, and he had a career game against Colorado on Tuesday. Diarra is still an incredible defensive presence. He can create off the bounce, but then, Aiden Mahaney, the transfer from St. Mary's, he's been struggling. He is a career 37% three-point shooter, but so far he's at 28% on the season. But they got Ahmed Noel from the Philly guard, top 50 prospect. He looked pretty good in his 13 minutes off the bench playing against Colorado. They just got to figure out that backcourt rotation, and it's good for UConn fans to know that if they're going to mess up now in November, like this is the time that you want to do it. And then, I mean, Dan Hurley, say what you want to say about him as his antics or whatever. Like I love him, but he's still one of the best coaches, if not the best coach in college basketball. And this team's going to turn it around for sure.
Yep, and it's good for him to learn, all right, maybe we went a little bit over the edge in the Maui Invitational as well, be able to dial it back a little bit more, and then be firing all cylinders in March as well, because you never want to be losing any sort of game. But that said, if you're going to lose the games, rather have it be in November rather than in March. But this man, he's always doing a tremendous job, whether that be in November, whether that be in March, whether that be in June. Joe, you do an amazing job covering this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Oh yeah, thanks. So my X account is STF_NCAA. Stretchingthefloor.blogspot.com is my Stretching the Floor blog where I focus on Northeastern mid-majors. I'm doing some stuff for Big East Vault, and then I'm also part of the bench mob for college hoops chat with Jim Mazzano. So yeah, just happy to talk hoops all this season, and looking forward to going to a bunch of games this year. And thanks for having me on again, Greg.
Absolutely. It's always great to be able to have Joe aboard. He does great work out there in the Northeast part of the country. Taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. And every single time he joins me, lends such great insight. So big thanks to Joe for joining me on Cuts to Cuts Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Friday as we get some bank shots. When I was asked by Uncommon Goods to do this read, I felt like, man, I am the perfect guy for this one, because with Uncommon Goods, they scour the globe for original, handmade, remarkable things. Somehow, some way, you know it's going to be perfect, and you're going to be supporting some of the little guys. And why I'm so perfect for it is, for those of you guys that watch everything that I do with my TikTok videos on the old Twitter/X, you'll notice I'm wearing all these low/mid-major college basketball jerseys, and Uncommon Goods, they're sort of like that for all of your goods for this upcoming season. They find you a nice variety of products. They're high quality, they're unique, oftentimes handmade. You're supporting a lot of, shall we say, smaller artists as well, and you're able to just find a home for a lot of different various things that if you're trying to look online thinking, man, where can I find this very unique thing? Uncommon Goods, they're going to be able to find that for you, and you're able to get 15% off your next gift by going to uncommongoods.com/coast. That is uncommongoods.com/coast, COAST. That gives you 15% off. Do not miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods, we're all out of the ordinary. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Joe Budzelek. He does such an incredible job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Doing great work over at stretchingthefloor.blogspot.com, the Big East Vault, and so much more. So big thanks to Joe for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Friday, this Black College Basketball Friday, as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at @GNR41, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is the big conference games that don't involve the multi-team events. Then we go Battle for Atlantis, ESPN events, Arizona, AccuSure, Ray's Children's event, NIT tip-off, Arizona again, AccuSure Classic again, and then the extra games involving teams in conferences like the Big South, the MEAC, the SWAC, Patriot League, the Northeast Conference, the America East, so the smaller conferences. So how about if we get things started with 8-19, 8-20 on the betting board? It is Dartmouth, and they're going to be playing on the road against Boston College. Boston College, 16.5 to 17-point favorites. 137 to 137.5 is the total, and did some my total 137.5, so if we could get a 137 or less in on the over for Boston College. Donald Hanna has really been the guy for them. He's been able to log 15 points, 8 boards, shooting 40% from three-point range. I do think that this has gone up a little bit too high. Do fear a little bit of a letdown after Boston College. They got the job done in the Cayman Islands, and they were just playing in the Cayman Islands a few days ago, so that's a lot of travel on these guys. For Dartmouth, they haven't played in about a week or so, so I actually think that they're going to be relatively well rested. Got a guy in Kate Haskins who's been able to log for the team about 14 points per game, and Dartmouth is looking much better on offense this year than they did a season ago. Last year, they were absolutely terrible on offense. With Haskins, he's shooting 42% from three-point range. Need to get much more out of Brandon Mitchell-Day, though. He's been dealing with injuries all season, but he's been able to get out there last few games, look a little bit more like himself. Last year, logged for the team about 9 points, 6 boards per contest, and this year that's been down to about 5 rebounds per game, and it's going to be very critical against a Boston College team that does have a guy in hand who's able to give you about 8 rebounds per game. Roger McFarland, who comes in from Southeast Louisiana, about 8 points, 7 boards, so like what he's been able to bring to the table, but Boston College does certainly turn the ball over about 12.5 times per game. That's a little bit of a concern. They've been able to have Chaz Kelly, who's been able to come in, give the team a little bit over 3 assists per contest as a primary pass-first guy, but do you think that this number has gone up just a little bit too lofty? 16 or more, won't take those points with Dartmouth, and then semi-total 137.5, so at a 137 or less, and on the over, 821, 822 on the betting board. Valparaiso, they are going to be on the road against DePaul. DePaul, a 13.5 to a 14-point favorite. Total on this game between 149 to 149.5. Made DePaul a 16.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Can't believe I'm actually coming around on this DePaul team, but Chris Holtmann brought in a lot of shooting, and right now it is clicking very well for this unit. As for DePaul, you've had Jacob Meyer lead the way with 15 points per game, but you just have a bevy of different guys. They're giving you production from the outside. CJ Gunn has been able to give you about 9.5 points per contest. He's only shooting about 32% from 3 this season, but Isaiah Rivera, 14 points on north of 43% three-point shooting. David Skogman, he last year was a top 50 guy in the country with his three-point shooting at 6'11". He's shooting north of 50% from three-point range. Do think that that's going to be going downward a little bit, but even someone like J.J. Traynor being able to chip in their 5.5 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, been impressive. DePaul does need to clean up the turnovers, about 13.5 turnovers per game, but this is not a Valparaiso team that necessarily strikes a lot of fear into you. Isaiah Stafford being out for pretty much the entirety of the seasoners. They're only generating as a collective about 4.5 steals per game. Now, I like Jefferson de la Cruz Monegro, who's been able to give you 2.5 assists, 11.5 points per contest. Always a fun name to say. He's been good in the backcourt. And then Devin Ellis, who comes on over from Maryland Eastern Shore, he's been able to log for the team about 12.5 points per game, but for this Valpo team, they only shoot 30% from 3. They do a few little things well. They're only turning the ball over 9 times per contest, shooting north of 80% from the free throw line, with Cooper Schwieger being able to chip in there 8.5 or so rebounds per game. But I'm just not in on this Valparaiso team. They've done it against really bad competition, like they're in on a 3-game win streak, but that was against Lindenwood, Eastern Illinois, and Northern Illinois. So really need to be seeing a little bit more out of them, and I do think that DePaul is going to be able to drain a bunch of threes, and Valparaiso keeps it relatively clean on offense as well. Did set my total at a 148.5. Think that this has got a little bit lofty, and I do think that those turnovers for DePaul could be costly to an over. So in on the under of 149 or higher, and willing to lay up to 16 with DePaul. 823-824 on the betting board. VMI is going to be on the road against George Washington. Old George, our nation's first president, is between 18.5 to 19-point favorites. 152 to 153 is your total line. Semi-total 161.5. I do like the over. This is a VMI team that they really don't turn down for anyone whatsoever, and they really don't play defense against anyone whatsoever, as dating back to last season, they are well outside the top 3 in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and it's a team that against Division I competition has really been flattened, and against really good teams, because they gave up just 70 points against Loyola Maryland, but prior to that, give up a 93 spot to Davidson. They give up a 93 spot against Pittsburgh. It's really not been a great run for them, and you've got a George Washington team that they've been able to get to the 83-point plateau in 3 out of their last 5 games, with Darren Buchanan leading the way, 15.5 points per contest. And for this coaching staff, headlined by Chris Caputo, they are really looking to play up-tempo. They have been dealing with an injury, as Garrett Johnson, one of their top scorers from a season ago, he's out of the fold. So that does make me a little bit more timid to lay this big of a number. I set my line at a 17.5, so won't take the 18.5 to 19 I'm seeing with VMI. Especially with George Washington, even though they play fast, they're only shooting about 30% from three-point range. Your main guy from the outside has actually been Trey Autry, who's been able to shoot 40+% from three-point range, more around 45% from 3, 10 points per contest, like what I'm seeing there. But Sean Hansen, the transfer that comes on over from Cornell, 3.5 points, 2.5 boards. You need a little bit more out of him. And then TJ Johnson on the flip side for VMI has actually been quite good for this unit. He's been able to supply the team with 16 points, shooting 43.5% from three-point range. Now, Augustinus Kidulis, he is someone that is currently dealing with a little bit of injury. He's already missed a game this far this season, but should be good to go for this one. 15.5 points, 6.5 boards. It's been a little bit inconsistent with him this season, but do like what I'm seeing there. And Tan Yizilglu, who comes out over from Turkey, he's been able to give you about 5.5 assists, 6.5 points per contest. Been liking his facilitation, though. I'll say this, he's also scored 3 more points than myself over the last 3 games as well. But do you think that VMI is going to be able to hold in there? They only turn the ball over 11.5 times per game, shooting north of 75% of the free throw line, so they're doing the little things well. And they're getting back in the fold Ricky Bradley Jr., a guy that 2 seasons ago was rock solid, 9.5 points, 5 boards on 38.5% three-point shooting for the team. Lance here over at Georgia State just really couldn't find his footing, and now he's back in the program. So I'm going to be willing to take the 18+ here with VMI, and at the total between 152 to 153. I set my total closer to north of 160, so in on the over. 825, 826 on the betting board. It is the Men of Troy, and they play us at Merrimack. Old Merrimack, the Merry Men, are an 11-point underdog. Total on this game is 136.5. And with Merrimack, I did set them as an underdog of 9 points, so I'm going to be willing to take those points. For Merrimack, number one team in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis last season. Still one of the best teams in the country with this regard. Had an incredible meltdown against UTSA meet for the Roadrunners about 48 or so hours ago, but they've got the top scorer in this game. That'd be Adam Clark. Clark has been tremendous. 20 points, 4 boards, 4 assists, 2.5 steals per contest. Now, the problem that you've got for Merrimack is that this is one of the worst three-point shooting teams that you're going to find in all of college basketball. Though I will say, right now shooting 22.7% from three-point range. Even for them, this has only got northward to go. Sean Trumper has been able to give you double figures. And then Devin Savage. Last year, he was shooting 34% from three. 2 seasons ago, more like 38% from the outside. His 20% three-point shooting should be going northward. Brian Antomino down low has been able to give you about 5 boards per contest. So that'll keep this team lively there, as Troy is going to have a nice leg up there. They've got Thomas Stout, who's able to give you about 5 boards per contest. Miles Rigsby has been a do-it-all guy, 13 points, 4 boards, and it's been a little bit of a slog for this Troy team as well. They're turning the ball over 17 times per game. I do think that this is a little bit of a bad matchup for them. You've been able to get a little bit of production as well out of the other Rigsby, and Marcus Rigsby, who he chips in there, a pair of assists, 7.5 points. He's been really the main three-point shooter, shooting 45.5% from 3 for a collective that shoots only about 30.5% from three-point range. Tatum Conaway, 2.5 steals, 4.5 boards, 5 assists, 9 points per game. Both of these teams are really good at being able to generate turnovers, so I think that this is going to be a sloppy, gross game that's going to be involving a lot of dead possessions. As a result, semi-total at 135, I'm going to be in on the under. And with Merrimack getting north of 9, I'm going to be willing to take those points. 827, 828 on the betting board. It is Tarleton State, and they're going to be playing against Iona. This is from Baha Mar Convention Center. So, neutral court game, and with Tarleton State, they're a 3.5-point dog. Total on this game, it is 137. And with Iona, I'm going to be willing to lay it. I did set Iona stupidly as an 8-point favorite. I've been burnt by this team quite a bit, but I want absolutely no part whatsoever of Tarleton State at this point. For Tarleton State, this is not the team of the past. As for Billy Gillespie, he's just not the guy that should be coaching the team right now. The interim coaching staff did a really good job last year. They decided to go back to Billy Gillespie. Why? I have no idea. That said, you've got an Iona team that has really been struggling this year, but I like what you're able to get out of DeJour Reeves. Guy that comes in from Northern Colorado, logging for the team 13.5 points, 2 steals. He's only been able to shoot 20% from 3. Iona currently shooting 36.9% from the floor, 27% from 3. It should be going northward. Need to cut down on the 17 turnovers per game, but I do think that Clarence Rupert is going to be able to win that battle down low. 9.5 points, 5.5 boards, was a part of that St. Peter's team that made the Elite 8. And then Yafet Munde, he comes on over from France, about 8 points, 7 boards. He was at the non-Division 1 level last year. Really like his overall game. And then on the flip side, Boo Boo Benjamin, he's been able to give the Tarleton team right around about 15 points per game. But what is really ailing Tarleton is that they were expecting to have Freddie Hicks out there on the floor. 2 seasons ago, he was this team's top scorer. Last year, he was over at Arkansas State, where he was giving that team like 12 points, 5.5 boards, and when he was at Tarleton 2 seasons ago, was a 16-point per game scorer. He is currently seen as much time out there on the floor as myself, and that would be 0 minutes. And you also have not seen anything out of Daquan Grimes as well. Grimes was a guy that last year was over at Baylor. He was able to give that team right around about 5 points per contest. He was supposed to be an impact guy, and with those guys out of the fold for Tarleton, they just have not had a lot. Chris Mbekpa has been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game, but you want to talk about sloppy. 22.8 turnovers per game for this Tarleton team. Now, they do generate a few turnovers of their own, but man, that is rough. Like, even though every single one of your players that has averaged at least 5.8 points per game is shooting above 41% from 3, that has actually made at least 1 3. I mean, it's still just a case where you can't overcome darn near 23 turnovers per game. It's a Tarleton team that is completely out of sorts. Iona, to their credit, they actually generate some turnovers, and I do think that they get the job done against a Tarleton team that they just have not been able to take care of the ball. This is an interesting circumstance. I do think that you get a little bit more of an up-tempo game, so I did set my total at 140. I do like the the over, as I do think that those turnovers turn into fast break points on offense. So do like the over, and I'm going to lay with Iona. 829, 830 on the betting board. It is the Ohio State University. They're going to be playing us to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh finds themselves as 3 to 3.5 point dogs. So on this game, it is 147, and semi-line at 3. Getting anything north of 3, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Pittsburgh. It's a Pittsburgh unit that is coming off of that rough loss against Wisconsin, but overall has been very good in their backcourt. Ishmael Leggett, he has been your main man, doing a bit of everything, along with Mr. Lowe, as Jalen Lowe has been able to give you 15 points. Both of these guys give you between 6 and 6.6 rebounds per contest. Lowe has been the main facilitator with about 5.5 assists per game. Leggett, a little bit of better three-point shooter at 35% from the outside, but both guys also give you 2 steals per contest. It's a Pittsburgh team that's done a nice job protecting the ball as well. Only about 9.5 turnovers per contest. Now, they are dealing with the injury to Damian Dunn, who was able to get her done with about 11 points per contest, so that does hurt them in the backcourt. They're going to be looking quite a bit more out of Brandon Cummings, who's been able to give you about 5 points per contest as a freshman, but still have good size. Guillermo Diaz-Graham is a true 7-footer that's able to pop it from 3-point range, 8.5 points, 7.5 boards, like what I'm seeing there. And then Cam Corn, he's able to give you 5.5 boards as well for this Ohio State team. They're now without Aaron Bradshaw. Who knows what that situation is, but it's not necessarily great. But you've got Devin Royal, royally down low, giving you 11.5 points, 8 boards for Ohio State. They're currently shooting 43.5% from 3-point range. Should be going downward, and it's been incredible what we've been seeing out of John Mobley Jr. As a freshman, he's currently shooting 59% from 3. For the most part, he's been coming in off the bench. He's been able to give you 15 points per contest. Bruce Thornton has been very efficient with about 5.8 assists to less than a turnover per game. Do you think that is going to be regressing just a little bit? Micah Parrish is a nice double-figure scorer along with Meek G. Johnson as well, but I do think that in the end, Pittsburgh going to be able to do a relatively solid job of matching up down low, and even without Damian Dunn in the fold, Pittsburgh's going to hold in there. Don't want them outright on the money line, but getting anything north of 3, going to be willing to take those points with Pittsburgh. Also semi-total at a 141, as Ohio State has been absolutely bludgeoning teams at home. Top 20 defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis when they are at home. Pittsburgh not necessarily a super up-tempo team, that they themselves have been quite good on defense. So I'm in on the under, and I'm in on those points with Pittsburgh. 831, 832 on the betting board. Tennessee Tech, they're on the road. They're facing off against Vanderbilt. Anchor down as Vanderbilt, a 21.5 point favorite. 155 to 155.5 is that total, and do think that we've went a bit too far here. I said Vanderbilt as an 18.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take the north of 3 touchdowns here. It's a Tennessee Tech unit that has played quite a few teams tough this season. I feel like they've gotten a little bit of disrespect as for this Vanderbilt unit. Certainly they are a high-flying, really good team that had some nice results out there in the great state of South Carolina a week ago. They did lose that game to Drake, but overall I have to like the fact that you're seeing Jason Edwards putting up 17.5 points per contest. And for Vanderbilt, they just don't beat themselves. 9.5 turnovers per game, but leaving something to be desired from the outside, shooting just 29.5% from 3-point range, and they really have 2 main rebounders, as Devin McLaughlin has been able to give you about 8 rebounds per game. Jalen Carey, he comes over from James Madison, where he was a reserve last year, and he's really busted up 7 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. So I do think that Tennessee Tech, a team that has a tough time on the glass, going to be able to hang in there. Daniel Igbaniwe, he's been able to give you about 5 boards per contest, but Rodney Johnson does a really good job in the backcourt. He's allowing for the team 14 points, shooting nearly 50% for 3. And as a whole, Tennessee Tech, they shoot 36.5% from the outside. They do a nice job not beating themselves as well. 10.5 turnovers per game, and now they're getting Makai Cameron in the fold as well. He was over at Northern Colorado last year. Couldn't get out there on the floor too much, but he was a pretty highly touted junior college transfer a few seasons ago, so some nice upside there. And they've got Jalen Johnson giving you about 5.5 assists, 5 boards, 13.5 points per game. Was a big part of their winning over Presbyterian as a nice underdog. He very nearly went on for a triple-double in that game. So I do think that Tennessee Tech's backcourt could allow them to be able to hold in there. Certainly not a savory situation down low, but I do think that with Tennessee Tech, what they've been able to do, especially with their offense being able to step up quite a bit as well. They've gotten to at least 69 points for their last 5 games. That'll keep them lively in this one. I did set my total at a 150.5. Tennessee Tech, while they do a solid job on offense, certainly not an up-tempo team, and to the credit of Vanderbilt, they've been able to play some pretty rock-solid defense at home this far this season. So I'm going to be in on that under, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Tennessee Tech. 833, 834 on the betting board. Battle for Illinois, as Northern Illinois is on the road. They're facing off against Eastern Illinois. Eastern Illinois, a 1.5 to a 2-point favorite. So on this game between 136 and 137. I said Eastern Illinois is a 6.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it with this Northern Illinois team. Just really not liking what I'm seeing out of them. James Dent Jr. has come on over from Western Illinois, so we've got a lot of directional Illinois happening here. He's been able to give the team right in that neighborhood about 10, 11 points per contest, throwing in there 3 assists. So he's been able to do a little bit of this and that, while Quentin Jones has been your main scorer with about 15.5 points per contest. Last year shot 40% from 3-point range while he was over at Cal Poly, so he's been a nice add for this team. But for this Northern Illinois team, it's just been a case where things have been incredibly sloppy with this offense. 13 turnovers per game. They have done a rough job in terms of their defense, as well as this is a Northern Illinois unit that they gave up 98 points to DePaul, and as a matter of fact, they have given up at least 75 points in each of their last 4 games. They had one good triumph over Monmouth, and past that, it's just been awful. They've also scored 60 points or fewer in 3 of their last 4 games. And for Eastern Illinois, this bunch is outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they played Northwestern to overtime on the road. They played a relatively solid game against DePaul as well, so we're seeing some good results from them. Nikel Shelton, he's been able to give you 17 points, 4 boards, and down low they should be able to win that battle. Cooper Jacoby has been able to give you 8 rebounds per game. When Eastern Illinois was actually halfway respectable last year, he was fully healthy, gets injured for the second half of the season. Things go off the rails from there, and you've got a few okay 3-point shooters for the team as well. Zion Fruster, he's been able to give you 10 points per contest. He's shooting north of 40% from 3-point range. You've also got Artis Stapleton, who's done a nice job being able to dish it out, 4 assists per game, and north of 2.2 steals per game. Eastern Illinois, pretty good at being able to generate turnovers. Northern Illinois doesn't necessarily provide that element. Recognize that Eastern Illinois coming off of just getting completely flattened by Valparaiso, but Eastern Illinois is a team that I've seen some things I actually like from them, and for Northern Illinois, there's not as much of that. So it is a circumstance where I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Eastern Illinois, set them as a 6-point favorite, and in terms of the total, I set mine at a 138.5 for Northern Illinois. I do think that their offense is going to be able to rise up a little bit more in Eastern Illinois, leaving something to be desired on defense, but they're showing me something on offense as well. So looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Eastern Illinois. 835, 836 on the betting board. It is Cleveland State, and they are going to be playing against Morehead State, and Morehead State does find themselves as 4.5 to 5-point underdogs. Dallas game is 129 to 129.5. Did set Cleveland State as a 5.5-point favorite, so one of these games where at a 5 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay the number. For Morehead State, just very clearly a team in transition. After a season ago, they had so much in Preston Spradlin. They were able to make the NCAA tournament, and now all that is gone. They've got one of their top 5 scorers returning from a season ago, and Deontay Miles, who has been able to give you 9.7 boards as a true 7-footer. He's pretty rock solid down low, but there's just really not a lot in the backcourt. Right now, Jalen Brazil, he's been able to give you just under 3 assists per game, 7 points per contest, but he's currently shooting a nice hearty 22% from 3-point range. And for this Morehead State team, even though he does a pretty solid job of being able to dole out the ball, it just hasn't lent to very good offense. They're shooting 24.5% from 3 and 62% at the free throw line. Just simply do not have guys that put the ball in the bucket outside of Kenny White Jr. White Jr. has been great, 16.5 points, 5.5 boards per contest, has spent a lot of time out there in the OVC at Murray State, Tennessee Tech, UT Martin. So, this guy is very well traveled with regards to that conference. And for Cleveland State, you need Abrim Adiba to be looking like the guy that was over at Coastal Carolina many years ago. He spent last year at South Carolina where he was incredibly banged up, but his last year at Coastal Carolina during the 2021-22 season, 5 boards, 5.5 assists, 8 points per game, was a really good facilitator. Right now, just 2.5 assists per game with 3 points per contest. Doesn't look like he's fully returned from being injured from a season ago. You do have Tevin Smith along Taj Shavosky, who've been able to combine for 20 points per contest. They're also shooting a combined less than 25% from 3-point range. It's Cleveland State shooting 22.5% from 3-point range. Maybe I'm just a schmuck, but I think that something's got to give, and both of these teams are going to be able to improve with their 3-point shooting. Like, there's no way you can go through an entire season and shoot below 23% from 3-point range. Typically, your low team in terms of 3-point shooting is right around about like 26-27%. Dylan Arndt down low has been able to give you about 8.5 rebounds per game. Oh, and additionally, it's not like you've got necessarily a great Morehead State defense either, so that'll be able to help out Cleveland State in the this sort of ordeal as well. You've got the Robinsons who have been able to give you a little bit of production with Chase Robinson leading the way. He's able to give you about 6 points per contest. So I do think that there's a little bit of upside with this Cleveland State team. They are one of the better teams at being able to generate turnovers in all of college basketball, and they get to go up against a Morehead State team that allowed 76 plus points in 3 out of their last 4 games. It's Cleveland State defense that has actually been very rock solid. They have given up 68 or fewer pretty much each of their last 5. So do think that Cleveland State finds a way to get the job done. Willing to lay up to 5 with them, and maybe I total a 133.5. I'm in on the over. 837, 838 on the betting board. It is James Madison, and they play us at George Mason. Old George finds himself in some spots as a pick'em in this game, some spots as a 1-point favorite, and your total on this game, it is 142 to 142.5. Unless if I'm mistaken, this is going to be a game that's going to be making my write-ups, and James Madison set them as a 4.5-point favorite. I think that they are the rightful favorite in this game. As for James Madison, it's a team that I really like. Preston Spradlin comes in, and I think that he's going to be able to do a rock-solid job of being able to instill defense into this team, as Xavier Brown is one of the main holdovers from a season ago. He's been able to do a very good job of being able to log for this team about 15.5 points, 3 assists, 2.5 steals per contest for a team that's currently shooting 38% from 3-point range. They need to cut down on the 12.5 turnovers per game, but you've got quite a bit down low, as you've had Elijah Hutchins-Everett, A.J. Smith combined for about 13.5 rebounds per game. On the flip side for James Madison, Woody Newton has had to be that main rebounder with about 6 boards per contest. You tell that they're really missing Keyshawn Hall from a season ago. He was versatile. He was able to do a nice job down low. Now, you've brought in Giovanni Embaruju from Siena, who's been able to log for this team 5.5 rebounds per game. And for George Mason, do think that when it's all said and done, they shoot a little bit better than 32.5% from 3-point range, but Katie Johnson, he's a real X factor. He was able to be a double-figure scorer for a long time out there in the SEC. His first 2 seasons on campus when he was playing over at Auburn and he was playing at Georgia, he was averaging 12-plus points per contest. Just hasn't really found it this year for a George Mason team that they play relatively slowly, but they don't necessarily play efficiently on offense. 13.5 turnovers per game, like Zach Anderson, standing 6'7", really shooting north of 50% from 3-point range. Should see a little bit of fall off there, but you also have Darius Maddox back from a season ago last year. Shot 41.5% from 3 with 14 points per contest. Still giving you 15 points per game, but that's been down to about 32.5% from 3-point range. Spradlin seems always do a pretty rock-solid job of being able to guard the perimeter, and bringing back Mark Freeman. That was his top scorer 2 seasons ago over at Morehead State. Missed all of last year due to injury, but he's picking up right where he left off over at Morehead State. 12 points, 4 assists. Love what he's able to bring to the table. And career about 34% 3-point shooter. I think that James Madison at home should be able to get the job done. So do like James Madison as a pick'em / a money line underdog. And then I did set my total at a 142.5. Do think that for James Madison, even though they're probably going to be looking to play slower in future years, just with this roster, they've got a pretty high octane offense, and you've got a George Mason team that they themselves have been a little bit wobbly with their defense against D1 competition, giving up 70 plus points at each of their last 2 games. So in on the over, and I do like James Madison on this pick'em / money line underdog line. 839, 840 on the betting board. UNC Wilmington plays us to Sam Houston State. Sam Houston State is a 1 to 1.5 point favorite. 150.5 to 151 is your total. Not really willing to go above the 1, but I'm going to be willing to lay the 1 with Sam Houston State. I set them as the slightest of favorites. With UNC Wilmington over the last few years, they just haven't been very good on defense. Last year, outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, picking up right where they left off last year. And for Sam Houston State, they just have an uncanny ability to be able to pull out close games. You've got Lamar Wilkerson, who's been able to give the team 20 points per contest. They are a little bit vulnerable down low in terms of not necessarily having one, I guess you call it true dominator, but Keon Scroggins, Khalifa Sayoko, these 2 guys have been able to give me about 4.5 rebounds per game, and Dorian Finzer, who comes in from Kansas State. He's been able to slide the team with 7 boards per contest for a team that's currently shooting a blistering 41.5% from 3-point range. Each of their top 5 scorers shooting above 40% from 3, and UNC Wilmington has been another team that I think is going to cool down a little bit with their 3-point shooting, and we've seen a little bit of that in the last few games. You still have 50% 3-point shooting out of Elijah Jamison, who's been able to give you 9 points per contest, so he's been able to do an okay job of being able to dial up from distance. But for Wilmington, other than what you've been able to get in the 8.5 boards, 11.5 points per game out of Noah Ross, you don't necessarily have a ton down low. Donovan Newby has been really good on the outside, shooting 35% from 3, 17.5 points per game, but this is not a team that necessarily puts on you a lot of of pressure. This is a Sam Houston State team that they're a little bit vulnerable to giving away turnovers, but they do a good job of taking it right back. Meanwhile, for this UNC Wilmington team, just been a little bit of a rough go of it for this team recently in terms of their last few games on defense, giving up 80-plus points in all but one of their games this far this season, which is a big reason why they set my total at a 151.5. Now that we're seeing a 150.5, 151, I'm willing to go over, even though it's going to be a relatively low possession game, in my opinion, for Sam Houston State. Willing to lay the 1. 841, 842 on the betting board. This is out there from the Bahamas. You've got Indiana State and Arkansas State to a battle. With Arkansas State an 8.5-point favorite. Your total on this game between 158 to 159. Set this line at 7.5. I think that here at 8.5. Now we've got our buy point with Indiana State. Certainly it's been a rough go of it for Indiana State this season, but for Arkansas State, still remember last season they were scoring about 20 points fewer per 100 possessions when away from home rather than at home, and this has been an Arkansas State team that has really been able to lock down a little bit more defensively this year than they did a season ago. They go up against an Indiana State unit that is very much in transition, but I like what I'm seeing out of Samaje Teal. He's a transfer from Presbyterian who's been able to log for the team 17 points, 4 boards, 5 assists, 2.5 steals per contest. They need a little bit more guys like this because, man, they're lacking that outside of him. But that said, Aaron Gray down low has been able to give you about 6 boards per contest. You've got Marcus Harden. He comes over from the MAC. He's been able to give you about 10 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. So he's been able to get some nice ancillary scores going. And then for Arkansas State, Taron Todd, who's been in college basketball for seemingly 15 years, has been able to lead the way with 15 points, 5 boards, and is shooting right around 48% from 3. For Arkansas State, their shooting is collective just 31% from the outside. That should be going northward, but I'm very concerned about the team shooting 59.5% at the free throw line. They've got one guy that is averaging more than 2.7 points per game that is shooting above 72.4% at the free throw line. Now, Kobe Julian, nice stat sheet sufferer, will give you a block, a steal, 5.5 boards, 13.5 points per game, but we've just been noticing a lot of the more, shall we say, off-the-ball guards like a Darren Ford, Joseph Pignon, that have been averaging right around about 9-10 points per game, but are not firing all cylinders from three-point range way that you'd expect. And they do bring in Terrence Ford Jr. Has been able to give the team like 4.5 assists, 7 points per contest, but after missing all of last season, just doesn't necessarily look right this season, especially with his three-point shot. He was shooting 2 years ago, 40% from 3. Right now it's down to about 20%. I do think that Arkansas State going to be able to exploit an Indiana State team that's really given it up defensively. They themselves give it up 77-plus points in all but really 2 of their games against Division I teams as far this season. And for Arkansas State, they've been able to crank up their tempo quite a bit as well. Had that close call against Alabama to begin the season, so did set my total at a 157.5. I do think that the neutral court environment does bog down this total just a touch, so here at 158 plus in on the under, but willing to take 8 plus here with Indiana State. 843, 844 on the betting board. East Carolina plays us to North Carolina A&T. A&T, a 13 to 13.5 point underdog. The last game is anywhere between 148 to 148.5, and with East Carolina, I did make them a favorite of 9 points, so I'm going to be willing to take the 13. A&T has some relatively good scoring backcourt pieces I think are going to be able to keep them lively in this one. Landon Glasper last year was giving the team 20-plus points per contest, and while he's seen a little bit of a fall-off this year, he's been able to have a little bit more help around him with Ryan Forrest being able to put in there 20 points per contest. You still have Cayman Shell, who's been able to do a nice job doling it out. He's given out a little bit north of 4 assists per game, and he's been able to emerge offensively as well. 8.5 points, a little bit over a steal per contest for a A&T team that overall, they are generating about 9.3 steals per game, and just like last year where they were a top 25 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, turning the ball over just 10.7 times per game. Nicolas Chidakidis, he's been able to come in, he's been able to give the team 7 boards per contest as well with a little bit of versatility. Then on the flip side for East Carolina, they're going to have the best player out there on the floor. That's R.J. Felton. R.J. Felton supplying the team with 22 points, 7.5 boards, a steal, a block per contest, shooting in the high 30s from three-point range, but don't have a lot outside of that from three-point range, shooting about 30% from 3. They do a nice job taking care of the ball as well, about 10.5 turnovers per game, but the team just is not the same defensively in terms of being able to guard the perimeter. Lots of various rebounders, so CJ Walker is able to give you 8 boards per contest. Shane Woodyard, 6'7" combo player, he's come in, he's been able to give the team about 6 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and they're doing this all with Jan Farrell, who comes over from St. Bonaventure, really not giving you too much down low. He's only been able to give the team right around about 2 boards per contest, but with this A&T team. They do a nice job being able to put points up on the board, 80 plus in each of their last 4 games. East Carolina, they're one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball, so it's a good old situation of something's got to give. I did set my total here at a 143, so seeing what we've got, I'm going to be willing to take those points with A&T, and with regards to the total, at a 148.5, do think that things get slowed down a little bit. I do think that East Carolina team that has given up in regulation 65 or fewer in 3 out of their last 4 games, they're going to be able to get this thing just halted a little bit more, and A&T stepping up a little bit more with their defense as well. So in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to take those points with North Carolina A&T. And then this game is going to be making my write-ups as well. This is 845, 846 on the betting board. Duke is going to be taking on Seattle. Seattle finds themselves as 27.5 point underdogs, and your total, you're going to be getting it at a 141. And for Seattle and Duke, they're both actually traveling back from lovely Las Vegas, as they were doing part in an event there over the last 48 to 72 hours, and I think that this number has just gone too far. I set Seattle as a 21.5 point underdog. Seattle doing a nice job being able to slow things down. Going into Thursday, 293rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and we got a guy down low in Matthew Alexander Moncrief, who I really like, giving you 14.5 points, 10.5 boards per contest. Need a bit more from the outside, but John Chrysofilis, who was a double-figure scorer seasons ago, began his career at Creighton, has been able to give the team 35% three-point shooting, 12 points per game. You do lose Cam Tyson from a season ago. That's a little bit of an issue for this team, but overall, I do look at the backcourt, bringing in Malik Arrington, who is over at Idaho State. He's been able to give the team 5 assists per contest. That should be able to keep the team lively. They go up against a Duke unit that they themselves just really have not been playing with too much tempo ever since the coaching regime change on over to John Shire, and Cooper Flagg is going to be the best player in the game. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. 17 points, 8 boards, 3.5 assists, stealing half, blocking half per contest. He does it all, and for Duke, they've been able to shoot as a collective about 38% from 3-point range. Still want to see a little bit more facilitation of Tyrese Proctor, though, as Con Cadeppel has really been that main facilitator in the backcourt, shooting about 32.5% from 3, which I expected a little bit more, and I do think that he is going to be able to give you a little bit more moving forward for this Duke team. They've got a lot of size, but compared to most mid-majors, Seattle is actually pretty long along the perimeter. They do have quite a few guys that I think are going to be able to keep up in this game. You've got some switchable guys that do a solid job on defense. Will Hembold has been able to give you some production with about 2.5, 3 boards per contest as a freshman, so I do think that with the Seattle team, they aren't going to be outgunned too much with regards to the defensive aspect of things. I do think that Duke's really going to be able to take it to them, and take it to them pretty hard in terms of the offensive side of things, but I do think that Seattle's defense is going to be able to allow them to hang in there against a Duke team that they themselves have been a little bit hit or miss all season long with regards to that outside shooting, and I do think that Seattle going to do an okay job on the glass. So wrote up the points with Seattle. I set this line at 21.5, and I'm going to be in on this over. I did set my line at 143.5, as I think that both teams execute offensively. 847, 848 on the betting board. It is Kentucky, and they play host to Georgia State. Georgia State just find themselves as 30 to 31 point underdogs. In your total on this game, it is 162. Also set my total at a 162. This opened up at a 161.5, and we can get back down to a 161.5. I'm going to be in on the over, but that's up with Kentucky. Going to make them a 26 point favorite. Feel like we just got a scotch too far here. This is a Georgia State team that I think is pretty well coached under Jonas Hayes. For Hayes, he's been able to do a nice job of just being able to find guys in the backcourt that can give you production, like a Tariq Nutter, who's been very versatile. He's been able to give the team 17 plus points per contest, throws in their 5 boards, a few assists. Not necessarily known as a great 3-point shooter or anything like that, but you've got Tariq Lane, who off the ball, he's able to give you 15 points. He's shooting 38% from 3. Overall, it's a Georgia State team that's shooting about 34% from the outside. Nicholas McMillan and his 7.5 rebounds per game should be able to keep the team lively, as Mari Williams has been very rock solid down low for this Kentucky team. He's been able to slide the team with about 10.5 rebounds per game, but outside that, you don't necessarily have a lot of rebounding on this team. You've got really good backcourt play. Lamont Butler has been able to give you 11.5 points per contest for a team that, as a collective, they're shooting 40% from 3, and Kobe Brea shooting 67.6% from 3-point range. I am sorry that it's going to be tilting downward sooner rather than later, but you also have Austin Carr, his versatility, 11 points, 5.5 boards. He shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range. It's a team that really doesn't turn the ball over a lot. 10.5 turnovers per game. This is not a Georgia State team that's necessarily feasting on turnovers, though, and for Georgia State, they've been able to step up a little bit more defensively as well. 72 points for the last, given up in 4 of the last 5 games. Now Kentucky, in pretty much all but 2 of their home games have been able to get past the 100-point plateau. In one of those games, they got to 97. So I do think that this is going to be very much an up and down and frenetic game, but I do think that Georgia State going to be able to hold in there. They're going to be able to approach like 65, 70 points, be able to do their part both with regards to the total and the spread. So set my line at 26. I'm willing to take the 30 plus here, with Georgia State did set my total at 162, side of 161 or less in on the over. 849, 850 on the betting board. It is Rice. We give our to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls, as they're going to be facing off against Hofstra out there in the Bahamas. And for Hofstra, they do find themselves as 2-point favorites. Your total on this game between 131 and 132. And with Hofstra, I did set them as a 3-point favorite. So I'm going to be willing to lay the deuce for Hofstra. This backcourt has been very interesting to say the least this season as they bring in Gene Amarusian. He was over at Iona a season ago where he was a 40% 3-point shooter, and he's really been able to evolve his game to be a bit more of a facilitator, giving out 4+ assists per contest. They needed that after last season. They did lose quite a few of those guys that they had in terms of being able to facilitate good offense, like Juan Carlos, but Cruz Davis, he's also been able to step up to the plate as well. 15 points, 4 assists, 3.5 rebounds. He began his career over at St. John's and Iona as well, and he's been able to give the team 47.5% 3-point shooting. Do think that that goes downward a little bit, but for this Rice team, they're just a little bit too sloppy for my liking. They are turning the ball over about 14.5 times per game. They shoot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Trey Bordno, who comes on over from the Big South, 14 points, 5 boards, 5 assists. He's been able to do a nice job there. And Kellen Amos, who's over from Central Connecticut, he's also given out about 3.5 assists per game as well. But Alan Usadovich, who was the top scorer from a season ago, giving you just 9 points per contest. You expect a little bit more there. There's not a lot of depth with this team as well. They should be able to win the battle down low with the 8 rebounds and 10 points per contest out of Caden Boom Boom Powell, who comes over from Wyoming. But Emma Rujan has also been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game for the Southster team, and they do have a 7-footer inside Sunday. He's just not necessarily an effective 7-footer. And additionally, Michael Graham has been able to give this team a little bit more rough and tumble down low, 5.5 boards, a little bit over a block per game. Hofstra, they need to clean things up with regards to their backcourt as well. The 14.5 turnovers per game, a little bit less than Savory. They don't necessarily force a lot of turnovers themselves, which should lead to a lot of clean possessions in this one. Big reason why I did set my total at a 141. You got a pair of teams that I feel like have some pretty good outside shooting. Hofstra has really been slowing things down to a crawl, but going up against a team in Rice that they themselves turn the ball over a lot, they don't necessarily force a lot of turnovers. I think that this allows for both of these teams to be able to pop off a little bit more with their offense, but with Hofstra, just feel like they have the better backcourt in this ordeal, which should win out. So willing to lay up to 2.5 with Hofstra and in on the over. 851, 852 on the betting board. It is Towson, and they play against Kennesaw State. We give our to Lane Kiffin. Go. All this is from the wonderful country of Canada, and right now you're finding Towson as a 1-point favorite and a total of 155. We saw Kennesaw State get slowed down by UC Irvine yesterday, and I do think that we could see something very similar today. I set my total at 145, so I'm in on the under, actually 155.5, but with Towson, set them as a 3.5-point favorite. Not necessarily the result that they were looking for yesterday, but I do think that this Towson team good to be able to match up really well down low. As for this Kennesaw team, you've been able to have Brandon Liu, the freshman, be able to give you about 7.5 or so rebounds per game, but with Towson, just have a lot of guys that sort of rebound by committee. You don't have that main man, unlike a season ago when you had Charles Thompson, but Nenda Tark is able to give you 13 points, 8.5 boards. You've had a guy in Christian May, who he just returned to the floor yesterday, as he's been missing last few games due to injuries, sort of been in and out of the fold. He's been able to give you about 5 or so rebounds per game. Want to see a little bit more out of him moving forward, but you've also been able to get right around about 5.5 rebounds per game out of Makai Lowry as well. Not necessarily giving you a lot on the scoring front, and that's a Towson team. They're outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, but they do a nice job of just being able to stay within themselves. By that I mean they turn the ball over less than 10 times per contest. They keep things disciplined. You've had Tyler Teata be the main guy with about 15 points per contest, who is currently dealing with an injury, but you have Dylan Williamson, who's able to step up, give you 14 points per game. Well, Kennesaw State, they're very much based around Simeon Kotal, who's been able to give this team 18 points, 4 assists, currently shooting north of 40% from 3-point range, and overall it's a unit that shooting 37% from 3 going into yesterday. Certainly was held down by UC Irvine, so that's a bit of an issue for this team, but you've also got Adrian Woolley, who's been able to give you 14 points, 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists as a true freshman. So it's a Kennesaw team that is looking to play up-tempo, that is looking to play a very offensive-based game. You've got a defense-oriented team on the flip side, and I do think that the defense going to be able to win out unless if Kennesaw State can get a little bit more out of Andre Weir, who he missed all of last season at Florida Gulf Coast, played in just 6 games due to injury. 2 seasons ago was a rock-solid starter, 9 points, 6 boards per contest, but I do think that with Towson, their overall rebounding ability, coupled with the fact that I think that they're going to be able to get their tempo, is going to allow them to be able to pull this one out. So, did set Towson as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the 1, and with this total of 155 in on the under. 853, 854 on the betting board. Texas Tech, they're going to be playing us in Northern Colorado. Northern Colorado, a 21 to 21.5 point underdog. Total on this game is 153.5 to 154, and I'm going to be willing to take those points with Northern Colorado. Set them as a 19.5 point underdog. This opened up at 20, so this is now moving in the direction where you got some value with Northern Colorado. As for Northern Colorado, been a little bit of a herky-jerk sort of year. It appears as though they're playing just a little bit better defensively than they have in past years, as my voice squeaks on you guys, but that said, I still do think that for Texas Tech, going to have a little bit of a tough time matching up with this offense. As Northern Colorado, very much one of the more up-tempo teams in all of college basketball, one of the more efficient teams they're going to find as well. As for Northern Colorado, the big key for this team being able to have the versatility of Jerron Riley, who doesn't necessarily score a ton. He's giving you 9 points per contest, but throws in there 6 boards, 6 assists. When he does pop it from 3-point range, has always been solid. A career 37.5% 3-point shooter, coming on over from Sanford as well. He knows how to be able to generate a few turnovers. For Northern Colorado, Isaiah Hawthorne has really been that main scorer. He's been able to give the team 17.5 points per game, along with Langston Reynolds. Reynolds about 3 assists. Both of these guys give you a steal and a half per contest, and they've been able to combine for a little bit north of 10 rebounds per game. It's a Northern Colorado team that stays within themselves as well, and that they only turn the ball over about 11 times per game. This Texas Tech team thus far has been able to generate quite a few turnovers, but I feel like Texas Tech's numbers are quite a bit warped by the fact that their first few games of the season were against teams like Northwestern State, Arkansas Pine Bluff, to really be able to pad those numbers. You've got Darion Williams, who's been solid, 16 points, 5 boards, 5 assists, really good versatility there, and then JT Toppin, he's going to be able to win that battle down low, a little bit north of 10 rebounds per game, but when it comes down to it, for this unit, they're trying to work in there a few different pieces, like an Elijah Hawkins, who does a nice job doling out 6+ assists per contest. The team is shooting 40% from 3-point range as a collective, with Kerwin Walton shooting north of 45% from 3-point range, 9 points per game. But I do think that for Northern Colorado, with their slightly improved defense, I'm not calling it amazing, but you know what? They've given up fewer than 70 points in 3 out of their last 5 games. It's marked improvement that they're going to be able to hold in this game. I do think that they're going to be able to find some open shots on Texas Tech team that they themselves have been able to do a very rock-solid job with their offense, but this was an opener of 153. Now that we're up to 154 in on the under, as I did set my total at 153.5, and with Northern Colorado, I'm going to take the north of 20. 855, 856 on the betting board, also out there in the country of Canada. UC Irvine and Kent State to battle, and Kent State is a underdog of 7 points with a total of 137, and for UC Irvine, I did set them as a 6-point favorite, so here at 7, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Kent State. UC Irvine, very impressive yesterday. They just completely shut down a pretty rock-solid Kennesaw State team in terms of being able to speed you up, and for UC Irvine, their big advantage in this game is going to be the big man in Ben Lutken, someone who stands north of 7 feet tall. He's able to give you 6+ rebounds per contest. He's able to shoot threes as well, so it's going to be a very hard guard. But for this Kent State team, it does appear as though they're getting back a little bit more of their swagger in terms of being able to generate turnovers. That's a big reason why they were able to make the NCAA tournament 2 seasons ago, and what is going to be such a big key for this team, Sion Medley, and his overall production, because he's not really much of a scorer, but if you can have him be a nice facilitator, generate a steal or 2 per contest, be a nice on-ball defender, he can be a good asset for this team. You've got Soron Hornbeek down low, who's a rock-solid defender. He's able to give you about 5 to 6 rebounds per game as well. You don't have as much 3-point shooting as you've had in the past, but Morgan Safford, he's been able to step up, give the team 11 points per contest after last season over at Miami of Ohio. He was a nice double-figure scorer, and now they've been utilizing Jalen Sullinger a little bit more of a 6th man, as he's been able to shoot north of 40% from 3-point range this season. He's giving you about 10 points per game, so he's seen a little bit of a changing of his role, as Von Cameron Davis has really been the ringleader for this team, giving you 16.5 points per game. But I do think that for UC Irvine, they're going to be able to find a way to be able to eke this one out with their backcourt, as you've been able to have Justin Hohen step into that point guard role very nicely. He's given the team north of 10 points per contest, gives you about 4.5 boards. He's really been able to do a nice job going from more of a just off-ball 3-point shooter from a season ago and being able to give out those 3.5 assists per game, because they had a really good point guard last season in Pierre Cockrell that moved on. Miles Shea, he's been able to give you 7.5 points, and he's currently shooting north of 40% from 3. And going into yesterday, UC Irvine is collective shooting north of 80% of the free throw line, north of 39% from 3-point range. They do an okay job of being able to generate some steals as well, and for this Irvine team. While they are very good defensively, this is also a team that can get it going offensively as well. 76 plus points in now 3 out of their last 4 games, but you take a look at them defensively. They have now held their opponents to 62 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. So an interesting circumstance here. I'm actually going to be in on the over. I did set my total at a 140. I do think that for Irvine, even though they're so great defensively, they're going to be very efficient on the offensive end, but I do think that Kent State going to be able to force some turnovers and remain in this game. So going to be willing to take those points with Kent State, and I'm in on the over. 857, 858 on the betting board. Now we head out to the battle for Atlantis as Indiana is going to be facing off against Providence. Providence right now a 4.5 point underdog. Total on this game is 141.5, and I did set Providence as a underdog of 6.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay with Indiana. Both of these teams have been far from impressive here in these first few days, especially Indiana, whose stock is very much dropping. But with Indiana, they should be able to win that battle down low. You've got a guy in Mackenzie Mbakpo who's giving you 6+ rebounds per game. He's able to let it fly from 3, 15+ points per contest. And Umar Ballo, he's still been able to give the team really good production, just under 9 rebounds per game, double-figure amount of points, just figuring out the backcourt. Someone like a Cannon Carlisle who comes over from Stanford. He's just really struggled to be able to find himself in this sort of backcourt. You've got Miles Rice, who's your main facilitator, about 3.5 assists, 11+ points per contest. And then on the flip side, you've got yourself a Providence team that they just still have not been able to get Bryce Hopkins back out there. If he makes his debut in this game, who knows how close to 100% he is going to be. And for Providence, you've been able to get a little bit down low to Christ Adesonko. He's been able to supply the team with about 5 to 6 rebounds per game, but he was limited to just 12 minutes yesterday, not even due to foul trouble or anything like that. He was both dealing with injuries, and he was just ineffective in general. You have been able to get Oswen Sume, hopefully I said that correctly, going down low. He comes over from the country of Nigeria, and he's been able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game. But for Providence, just not a lot going on from the outside. They did go 8 of 21 from 3-point range yesterday, and you've got Jerron Pierre, who's able to give you a double-figure amount of points. Wesley Cartlett, he's been able to give you about 10 or 11 points per game as well. But for this Providence team, just been very meh for them, and having to match up with the likes of Malik Renew and company, I think is going to take it out of them. I'm willing to lay the number here with Indiana. I set them as a 6.5 point favorite, and made my total 136.5. Providence, a top 40 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and well, it's at the top 225 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And this is also an early 8 o'clock a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern time game. So I'm in on the under, and I'm in on Indiana laying the points. 859, 860 on the betting board. Arizona and West Virginia do battle from the battle for Atlantis. Right now, that total is 152.5, and Arizona is a 5.5 point favorite. With Arizona, I set them as an 8 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay it. For West Virginia, they have to bounce back after back-to-back overtime games, and this team really doesn't have a lot of depth. For West Virginia, you've been able to have some good versatility out of both Javon Small along Tucker DeVries. These two guys are combined for about 33 points, 9 boards, 6 assists, 5 steals between the two of them, and both entered into yesterday, shooting north of 38% from 3-point range. But you knew that wasn't necessarily going to be long-lasting for our core, that they do shoot about 35.5% from 3. I think that can be a constant throughout the season. Armani Hansberry has been able to give the team 7.5 rebounds per game, but he's the lone guy in the roster that's really giving you north of 5 rebounds per game for this Arizona unit. They should be able to control things down low with Toby Awaka being able to register for the bunch about 10 rebounds per game for Arizona. Certainly has been a all-over-the-place team over the last few games, but Anthony De La Rosa, who comes over from Campbell, where he was doing it all, 19.7 boards, 3+ assists, able to pop it from 3-point range. He's going to be a nice, shall we say, impact guy for the team. And Caleb Love seems to be finding his footing a little bit more as well. Now, he had 18 shots and he had 17 points yesterday, but certainly better than what we saw in that Duke game. Jaden Bradley has become that main scorer for the team, but just all the versatility and all of the overall size with someone like a 7'2" Monte Eunice Crivas, who's able to give you some solid rebounding, I think is going to be massive in this spot. And I do think that for Arizona, even though they've looked a little bit shaky over the last few games, and they are 3-3 overall, that they're going to be able to bounce back, find a way to be able to get it done against a West Virginia team that they just don't have a lot of depth as well. That's a big thing that really has me having some trepidations with taking this team in game number 3 in 3 days. So it is a game where I'm going to be willing to take a shot on the over as well. As we know, Arizona, one of the more up-tempo teams in all of college basketball. West Virginia, they themselves have been able to get to at least 75 points in 5 out of their last 6 games. So do think that this is going to be an up and down game. Do like the over semi-total 156 and one of the lay up to 7.5 with Arizona 861, 862 on the betting board. Louisville is going to be playing against Oklahoma in the battle for Atlantis. Right now, Louisville is a 3.5 point favorite. Total on this game is 148.5, and I did set Louisville as a favorite of just 2 points. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on Oklahoma. I do think that the overtime game yesterday for Louisville is going to be taking a little bit out of them, and just in a back-to-back spot, I trust in a team that's been around each other a little bit more, and that's what Oklahoma has been. And for this Oklahoma unit, they've been doing a nice job of being able to generate turnovers. This team is getting north of 10 steals per contest. Really, both of these teams have been, but for Louisville, it's just a little bit more of a team in transition, and it's a team that doesn't necessarily have a ton down low outside of Keyshawn Pryor. You've been able to have Javon Hadley be able to supply the team with 9.5 points, 6.5 boards, so I've been liking that. But that said, this is a Louisville team that it's a team that I think is going to be a little bit too reliant upon the jump shot, and when you're dealing with game number 3 in 3 days, that's something that goes on you a little bit. The legs, they've been turning the ball over about 11.5 to 12.5 times per contest, and for Oklahoma, you've got Jalen Moore who's able to give you more. Love his game as he's been able to supply 16 points, 5.5 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, and for Oklahoma as a whole, they're shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range. Jeremiah Fears has had a few turnover woes thus far this season, but overall has been able to do a really good job as freshman stepping in, giving the team well north of 17 points per contest. He gives you some rebounding. He's been able to dole it out with about 4.5 assists per game as well, so really love his overall game. On top of that, you've been able to get just under 8.5 rebounds per game out of Sam Godwin as well. You've got Bryson Gudine back after he missed the beginning part of the season. Last season over at Fairfield was a north of 45% three-point shooter. Kobe Elvis is able to help out with both facilitating and being able to hit some threes as well. So I really like the depth that this Oklahoma team has been able to build, especially with Gudine now back to the fold, and with this Louisville team with them just dealing with a lot of moving parts in general. I think that it's going to be a little bit tough for them to be able to cover this game. I think that Louisville has a little bit more talent here, which is why I did set them as a 2-point favorite, but I feel like this number has gone up just a little bit too far. So I'm going to be willing to take those points with Oklahoma. Oklahoma, traditionally a slow and controlled team, and I think that both of these teams struggle with their shooting in this game, so semi-total 146 in on the under, and I'm going to be in on those points with Oklahoma. 863, 864 on the betting board. It is Gonzaga, and they're playing against Davidson, also out there in the battle for Atlantis, and right now Gonzaga, 20.5 point favorite. Total on this game is 153, and for Gonzaga, set them as a 17-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Davidson. Davidson was a team that I was a little bit lukewarm on coming into this event, and for Davidson, it's been up and down for them really all season long, but a nice quality win yesterday against Providence, and Reed Bailey is a guy that's really standing out to me. Entered into yesterday, giving the team 17 points, 7 boards per game. Now for Davidson, they're going to have a little bit of a tough time down low, but what are you going to be able to get out of Graham Ike? We saw in game number 1 that loss against West Virginia. They had him out there for just 14 minutes, and then yesterday we saw him out there for 20 minutes. He looked much more rock solid, 14 points, 7 rebounds. Ryan Nembhard just continues to be efficient. He did have 5 turnovers in that game against Indiana, but still, as an assist-to-turnover ratio, it's well north of 4 this season. Nolan Hickman is able to give you double figures as an off-the-ball scorer, and then you've got Kayleigh Battle, who's been able to supply the team with 15-plus points per contest as well, but for Davidson, they've done a nice job being able to find Bobby Durkin as a nice go-to guy in terms of a bit of everything. He's able to give you a pair of assists. He's able to give you 16 points, 4.5 boards. A little bit of a top-heavy Davidson team. Would like to see them just get a little bit more out of their bench, but that said, even without that, even though this is game number 3 in 3 days, I do think that they're going to be able to find some open shots on a Gonzaga defense that it's much better this year. There's no question about it, but they still do have a little bit of vulnerability from the outside. I do think that you're going to be able to get some sneaky production as well out of Zach Lapotte, who he has come in as a young guy. He did not have his best showing against Providence yesterday. He was only able to give the team like 1 rebound in 9 minutes, but when they have used him, he has been able to do a nice job being able to generate some production. He's able to give you about 3.5 boards. He's not a great 3-point shooter, but he's able to hold it down on the glass, be a nice on-ball defender. Do think that Davidson going to be able to hold within this number, semi-number at a 155 in terms of total, so I'm in on the over. And with Gonzaga, made them a 17-point favorite, so I'm willing to take those points. 865, 866 on the betting board. Minnesota and Wake Forest do battle from the great state of Florida, and right now with Wake Forest, they are a 2.5 point favorite. Total on this game 131.5. I did set Wake Forest as a 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. For Minnesota, I'm just not in on this team. Like, Dawson Garcia is actually going to be the best player out there on the floor in my opinion. Dawson Garcia give me 20 plus points per contest, give me north of 7 rebounds, so he has been able to do an amazing job for this team. But outside of Dawson Garcia, who else is going to be able to step up for this unit, as you've got Lucai Patterson, who's currently got an assist-to-turnover ratio of right around about 4 at the very least. He did going into that Wichita State game, and for Wake Forest, they entered into yesterday shooting 29% from three-point range, and then they go 3 of 20 from three-point range. This should be going northward. Now, they can't have their coach and Steve Forbes just going completely psycho like he did in the game yesterday, getting double technicals. That was not good, to say the least, but I do think that Parker Fredrickson, who has come off the bench and has not been as effective as he was a season ago last year, he was able to shoot 36.5% from three. This year, he's shooting 20.5% from three-point range. You should see a little bit of a rebound. You've got, in terms of rebounding, Trayvon Spillers, who's been able to give you 8+ boards per contest. Would like to see a little bit more out of Efton Reed, just 4 points, 3 rebounds in the game yesterday, but in terms of overall size, Wake Forest, they've got the leg up there. And then for Minnesota, they get worn out by the fact that they have to go to overtime yesterday against Wichita State. They themselves have been ice cold from three. They went 3 of 23 yesterday. That should be going northward. Femi Odekale, he's been able to bust out a little bit more, 13 points, 8 assists yesterday after he was averaging fewer than 6 points per contest. You've got Brendan Rigsby and Parker Fox, who are nice ancillary scorers as well. Fox also went 2 of 7 at the free throw line yesterday. That should be going northward after he did shoot about 50% from the free throw line the previous year. But that said, for this Minnesota team, I do think that they get a little bit outgunned by a Wake Forest team that I think is going to start to hit their true potential as the season goes along. Did set my total at 133. Both of these teams were anemic from three yesterday. I expect a little bit of a rebound here. So looking at the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 4.5 with Wake Forest. 867, 868 on the betting board. It is Florida, and they're going to be playing against Wichita State. This is from Kissimmee, Florida, and the Gators are an 8.5 point favorite. Total on this game is 151.5. Except Florida is an 11.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Maybe I'm just a little bit too down on this Wichita State team, but I really like what I'm seeing out of Florida, and I think that they're going to be able to control the battle on the glass. As for this team, you've got just so many guys that are able to step up, give you 5+ rebounds per game. Alex Condon has been a nice machine down low, as he's been able to give you about 11.5 points, 6.5 boards, a block and a half per contest. Sam Alexis gives you a block and a half, 5 boards, 8.5 points per game. Thomas Howe gives you a little bit over a block, 6.5 boards. You just have so many different guys that are able to stuff the stat sheet down low, and I do think that Urban Klofstar, as he gets a little bit more time in the offense, he's going to start to be a little bit of a, shall we say, X factor for them. You do have, though, a nice trio, and Elijah Martin, Will Richard, along with Walter Clayton. All these guys have been able to give you at least 13.5 points per contest and combine nearly about 46 points per game, with having Martin being a high 33-point shooter. It's not even a Florida team that shot it amazing from three. Going into yesterday, shooting just 31.6% from the outside, but they're keeping things clean, turning the ball over only about 10.5 times per contest. They do a nice job hitting their free throws. They generate quite a few steals on defense. They give themselves second and third chance opportunities. They're still looking to play super duper up tempo, don't get me wrong, but the defense has been able to come along for the ride as well. They have given up fewer than 70 points in 5 out of their last 6 games, but you've got a Wichita State team that's very much looking to run as well. 79+ points in 4 out of their last 6 games. That's really the old Paul Mills style, and I do think that the Paul Mills style is going to lead to very much an up and down game. So I total 157.5, so I'm in on the over. And with Florida, going to be willing to lay the 8.5, set them as an 11.5 point favorite. 869, 870 on the betting board. It is Bowling Green, and they take on Weber State. Weber State is a 2.5 point favorite, and your total on this game between 145.5 to 146. This game did make my write-ups, as I set Bowling Green as the 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line for Bowling Green. They are currently about 300th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but you know who's even worse? Weber State, who is about 346th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. For Weber State, they're not really doing a great job of being able to corral rebounds. They go up against a Bowling Green unit that has been pretty solid at being able to take care of the ball as well, and their shooting, Bowling Green, is about 39% from three-point. I do think that that's going to start to dry up a little bit, but for Weber State, they last year had Dylan Mitchell, who was a do-it-all sort of dynamo for the team, and now they're looking to life without him. Blaze Red has been able to give you 17.5 points in the backcourt. He's doling out 4.5 assists, 4.5 boards, so he's been able to do a nice job there for a team that is only turned the ball over about 10.5 times per contest, but also do shoot 66% at the free throw line. You've got a guy, Nigel Burris, that's currently shooting north of 60% from three-point range. That should be a number that's going to be going downward a little bit, and you just don't have a lot down low, as you got Dawson Kaler, who's been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game. He's the only guy in the roster that's able to give you north of 5 boards per contest. Bowling Green has been one of the lesser teams in all of college basketball at being able to grab offensive rebounds for second chances, but Sam Towns, he's been able to give you about 7 rebounds per game. Love the game of Marcus Johnson as well, 18 points, 4 boards, currently shooting 42% from three-point range, and I do think that for this Bowling Green team, even though they're in a little bit of transition, that they're going to be able to keep things relatively clean on their end of the turnover turnover battle. They only turned the ball over about 11.5 times per contest. That nearly 40% three-point shooting, it should go downward, but the 80% free throw shooting in this sort of a game, I think is going to be big. And also having Trey Thomas back, after he last season gave the team double figures, only about 8 points per contest this year, should be able to go northward. So I did write up Bowling Green on this one. I'm willing to take them on the money line. Somebody told 144.5 as well. Do think that this is going to be a rather slow, controlled game. Weber State really looking to slow it down. Bowling Green looking to play up tempo. This is a game out there in Tempe, Arizona, so I do think that the neutral court causes for a little bit less scoring in on the under, and I'm in on Bowling Green. 871, 872 on the betting board. New Mexico State, they play against Pepperdine out there in Tempe, and for New Mexico State, they are a 4.5 point favorite. Total on this game is 138 to 138.5, and for New Mexico State, set them as a 3 point favorite, so being able to get north of 4, going to be willing to take those points with Pepperdine. Pepperdine, without question, is a team that's in a lot of transition, but I do like what I'm seeing out of this Pepperdine team. It's a really interesting and sort of eclectic unit that they are now being run by Mr. Ed Schilling. He comes on over from the East Coast, and he's brought with him quite a bit of three-point shooting. You've been able to have Mo Odom give the team north of 5 assists per contest, a guy that was out in the WCC last season, actually, with Pacific. Now, on the flip side, you've got a New Mexico State team that they had to replace everything from 2 seasons ago. Last year, you brought in Jason Hooten, and he's been able to do a nice job of Hooten with Christian Cook being able to give you 13.5 points per contest. Zwadi Jackson, who was one of the best players at the Division II level last year over at West Georgia, he's come in and he's been a really good facilitator and just a amplifier of this offense, as he's been able to give the team 12 points, shooting north of 50% from three-point range, about 4 assists per contest. But even with them now in, you do have a New Mexico team that's throwing the ball over 14 times per game. They should be able to win the battle down low, as they've got Shaminga squared, as you've got Nate and Emmanuel Shaminga give you a combined 10 rebounds per game. Peter Filipowski has been able to give you 7 rebounds per game as well. But Duyisa Bitka, hopefully I said that correctly, he's been able to give this Pepperdine team right around about 7 boards per contest. And Stefan Torvik, his 6'7" size and good versatility should allow this Pepperdine team to hold in their 19 points, 6 boards at about 6'6". He's been able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range. And Pepperdine is shooting as a collective only about 30.5% from three-point range. Zion Bethane, guys like this, should be able to pick it up from three-point range, especially against a New Mexico State team that they have really been giving it up from the outside thus far this season. It's a New Mexico State team that is very willing to gamble for turnovers, and when they don't get those turnovers, that leads to open shots. So I'm going to be in on the points with Pepperdine. I was willing to take anything north of 3, and did somebody total 147 as well. I do think that Pepperdine is going to start to heat up from three-point range, and I think that they're going to be a little bit more of an up-tempo team. I recognize that Pepperdine has scored 63 or less each of their last 4 games, but also have a New Mexico State team that they themselves have had their ups and downs on defense. So going to be looking at the over and the points with Pepperdine. Now, these next few games have no numbers up, 873, 874. It is CCU against Colorado State, and I've got my handicap. Made TCU a 7.5 point favorite, and with regards to the total, I made mine a 143.5. So 7 or less, one to lay with TCU, 8 or more taking those points with Colorado State, and then 143 or less in on the over, 144 or higher the under for Colorado State. Just not the same team that they were a season ago, with Isaiah Stevens now being out, and for TCU they do have quite a few moving pieces that they do have to maneuver, but I do think that this team is going to be able to do a solid job of being able to maneuver those, and coupled with that, you've got the top rebounder in this game, Ernest Ode, who's been able to give you about 9 rebounds per game. Now, Niquay Clifford has had good versatility for Colorado State. He's able to supply the team with north of 18 points per contest, a little bit north of 9 rebounds per game at 6'6". So I think that he loses that battle down low. Has been able to shoot north of 40% from three-point range, but Bowen Bourne just doesn't appear to be the world's greatest fit for this Colorado State team. Going into yesterday, was averaging about 5.5 points, 3 assists per contest after being much more of a, shall we say, ball-dominant guard while he was over at Northern Iowa. Ethan Morton has been able to give you about 3.5 assists per game, and Jalen Crooker Johnson, nice versatility coming in as the OVC Rookie of the Year. Season ago, double-figure scorer, but for TCU, you've got a lot of guys that they just give you some good ancillary contributions. Now, yesterday, they just could get absolutely nothing going against Santa Clara, scoring 52 points, but you've got a guy, Noah Reynolds, who's been able to give out 4+ assists per contest. He has found his role as being a main facilitator. Frankie Collins was a top 20 player in the country in terms of total steals last season for TCU. Yesterday, they just won 1 of 17 from three-point range, and I, without question, think that this team is going to be able to bounce back from that. Tarzarian White, he's been able to give you a little bit under 10 points per game. He's been a little bit hit or miss there. Sean Elouette, though, he's been able to give you some nice facilitation. He's been able to give you about 10 points per game as well. Do think that for TCU, after everything went wrong for them yesterday against Santa Clara, that they're going to be able to bounce back a little bit more. And this is a Colorado State unit that has been a little bit suspect with regards to the defensive side of things as well. We have seen them now give up north of 70 points in 4 out of their last 5 games. As a matter of fact, north of 73 points points. So it is a circumstance where both of these teams, I think, bounce back after rough days offensively. 143 or less in on the over, 144 or higher the under, with TCU willing to lay up to 7 with them. 8 or more going to be taking those points with Colorado State. 875, 876 on the betting board. Also from the great state of California, it is Washington and Santa Clara doing battle, and my handicap is Washington being a 1-point favorite, and total on this game I set it as a 147, so 146.5 or less, and on the over 147.5 or higher the under. If Washington is for some reason an underdog, we'll take them on the money line. If not, anything north of a point, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Santa Clara. It's a Broncos unit that had a few losses early on during the season that were a bit off-putting, but does feel like they're starting to find it as they completely took it to TCU yesterday. And for Santa Clara, all of a sudden their defense is starting to be able to step up as well as this team. So I'll give it up 71 points or fewer in each of their last 3 games. Adama Ball is someone that I'd like as a nice off-ball scorer. He's been able to give the team north of 13 points per contest, but down low, they should be able to hold up against Great Osabor, as you've got Johnny O'Neal, who's been able to give the team 6 boards, not necessarily scoring the way they did 8 seasons ago, but at 6'10", he's able to give you some 3-point shooting. Christoph Tilley is a true 7-footer that entered into yesterday, shooting 38.5% from the outside. He'll give you about 4.5, 5 rebounds per game, double-figure amount of points. And Carlos Stewart, just some more and more that he gets acclimated to the offense after 2 seasons ago. He was averaging 15 points per game, spent last year at LSU, and now is transferred back. He's going to be better and better. And for Washington, just have so many question marks in terms of this backcourt. You've got Tyler Harris, who comes over from Portland. He's been able to supply the team with 12-plus points per contest at 6'8", really good versatility, but you have yet to be able to find that main facilitator for this team. It might actually just be Osabor, who had 7 assists for the team yesterday. He had 16 points, 8 rebounds in that game, relatively close to his season averages. Tyree Iheanacho is a nice do-it-all sort of player that comes in from North Dakota, but just doesn't feel like he's necessarily the world's greatest fit on a Big Ten team. He gives you about 6.5 to 7 points per contest, 4 boards, 2.5 to 3 assists per game, but doesn't really do anything great for a Washington team that they leave something to be desired with their 3-point shooting. Harris yesterday went 5 of 8 from 3-point range, but everyone else had a pretty pedestrian day. And for DJ Davis, I was just expecting a little bit more out of him after he was a nice scorer over at Butler 2 seasons ago, began his career over at UC Irvine, has averaged 13.5 points per game or more each of the last 2 years, and just has not been able to do that thus far this season. So at anything north of 1, I'm going to be taking the points with Santa Clara. I'm willing to take as a money line underdog / a pick this Washington team. And then with the total 146.5 or less in on the over, 147.5 or higher the under. 877, 878 on the betting board. It is NC State, and they're going to be taking on BYU. Another neutral court game that is out there in San Diego, California. No numbers up on this game, so I'll give you guys my handicap. BYU, I said, as a 6-point favorite with a total of 154, so 5.5 or less willing to lay with BYU, 6.5 or more taking those points with NC State, 153.5 or less, and on the over, 154.5 or higher the under for BYU. This team has been able to do a really nice job with their 3-point shooting, but you tell that they had some turnover woes yesterday. Ken and Catchings, he's been able to give you double figures, and he was really hot from 3-point range yesterday. I just don't know if Lightning is going to strike twice. He just feels like a little bit of a streaky, deaky sort of player, but for the NC State team, certainly a team that has diminished in terms of their overall outside shooting from seasons ago. Last year, they were able to shoot from 3-point range well north of 34%, but that really hasn't translated into this year. Jane Taylor has been able to give you a double-figure amount of points per game, and down low, I just feel like there's something that hasn't been unlocked quite yet. You've got Ben Middlebrooks, Brendan Huntley, Hatfield. These 2 guys are combining for about 10 or so rebounds per game, but they just haven't given you as much in the front court as I was expecting. Marcus Hill comes in as a nice scorer from Bowling Green last season that averaged 20 points per game, but even at Bowling Green, he was shooting less than 30% from 3-point. Have some nice facilitation. This team, last year, top 25 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They're not quite at that level this year, but they've still been solid with Michael O'Connell being able to dole out about 4.5 assists per game, keeps it relatively clean, and he himself a mid-30s 3-point shooter, but even with BYU being a team that could sometimes make a few mental mistakes, and they did beat up on some really bad competition to start out the year, should be able to control things down low with Kebakita, along with Fusani Traore entering into the day with north of 18 rebounds per game. So going to be willing to lay up to 5.5 with BYU, 6.5 or more, taking those points with NC State, and then 153.5 or less in on the over, 154.5 or higher the under. 879, 880 on the betting board. This is Ole Miss. They're going to be taking on Purdue, and right now we're seeing an opener just come onto the board at circa, with Purdue being a 4.5-point favorite. Total on this game is 145.5. I said Purdue is a 5.5-point favorite, so I'd be willing to lay the 4.5 with Purdue. Really like what I'm seeing out of the backcourt of this team. Now down low, they're dealing with injuries, and they just are not the same team that they were last season. That's going to happen when you lose a giant of the earth like Zach Edey and a giant of the earth in Jacobson that goes out with the injury, but Drake Huffman-Wren has really been able to pick it up for the team. 18 points, a little bit of a different big man in terms of just what he's able to provide for the team, but still giving you north of 6 rebounds per game. He's able to pop it from three-point range. And just Purdue as a whole shooting north of 40% from three-point range. And you've got an Ole Miss team that has a whole bunch of shooters on their team as well. They entered into yesterday shooting 36% from the outside, but that was even with Matthew Morrell shooting just 31% from three-point range. Last year he was a nice 14-plus point per game scorer. Entered into yesterday shooting for just 12 points per game, but Jalen Murray, Sean Padula, these guys have been able to give you combined about 27 points per game. And Padula has done a really nice job just not turning the ball over in general. He's giving up fewer than 2 turnovers per game. He's running some nice, efficient offense. He's able to give the team 4 boards per game as well. And then for Jamin Brakefield, he's just a nice X factor. That stands 6'8". He's able to give you some 3-point shooting, but even when the 3 is off, he's able to give you those 6 boards. He's able to give you a little bit of facilitation as well. Ole Miss plays some good positionless basketball that I think is going to have a lot of upside moving forward. They do have to, though, face off against a Purdue team that has Braden Smith, who's just oh so versatile. 12 points, 5.5 boards, 9 assists, and then Fletcher Lawyer shooting north of 40% from three-point range off the board, with guys like Miles Colvin, Cameron Heide, all being able to shoot it well from 3. Just too many weapons for Ole Miss to overcome. Now, neither of these teams are super duper up-tempo. I do think that Purdue is doing a better job of starting to lock down with regards to their defense, especially from the perimeter, and even though they're not generating a lot of second chance opportunities on the board, they're not allowing their opponents to either. So it's a game where I set my total 143.5 in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 with Purdue. 881, 882 on the betting board. Utah State and North Texas do battle in the NIT tip-off out there in Florida. North Texas is a 5.5 point underdog. Total on this game, it is 138.5. Semi-total of 139.5. I'm going to be in on the over. It's a something's got to give scenario with Utah State being a top 20 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, coming off of being incredibly ice cold, which is really the lone reason why they didn't cover yesterday, going up against a North Texas team that is one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. But with Utah State, did set them as a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Like with Utah State, even though they did not cover yesterday against St. Bonaventure, I loved what I saw from this team as they won the turnover battle, they won the rebound battle, and you still have a pair of guys that are both able to give you 15 plus points per contest at return from a season ago. And Ian Martinez was able to shoot well north of 40% from three-point range, and then you got 15 points and 12 rebounds out of Mason Fosloff yesterday, as well as been able to give you 5 boards. He's throwing in there 15 points overall for the season. Ubin Gasterse, he finally missed a shot yesterday. He hadn't missed a shot all season long prior to yesterday, but he's been rock solid as a very efficient scorer down low again. Team shot just 34.5% from the floor, and they still won the game yesterday, so that's something that stands out to me. And then on the flip side, you've got a North Texas team that they're a bottom 20 team in terms of total possessions per game. They're looking to make things slow and grimy, and they bring in Aiton Wright, who's been able to give you 12 points per game. You saw this team just completely dominate Northern Iowa yesterday, and they shot 9 of 17 from three-point range to be able to do so. I like what Jasper Floyd brings to the table. Not necessarily too much of a scorer, but it'll give you those 3 assists, those 5 boards, just a nice grimy player that is going to be willing to do those little things. And then you've got Mule Sissoko, Grant Newell, who both give you about 4 rebounds per game down low as well. And then you're going to need to have a little bit more out of Jonathan Massey, who came in off the bench yesterday. They give you 5 rebounds, but did not give the team any scoring whatsoever. Feels like they just really don't know what to do with him at this point, as he's a guy that I think can really be able to elevate this team in terms of his versatility. But I do think that for Utah State, they're going to be able to get things cranked up a little bit more. This is a North Texas unit that has been incredible with regards to their defense. They have given up 66 points or fewer, and I believe now every single game thus far this season. But you've got a Utah State team that just has not been denied offensively all season long. So I did set my total 139.5, especially. I do think that this has the propensity to have some late game following. So you're the 138.5 in on the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 7 with Utah State. 883, 884 on the betting board. It is Northern Iowa playing against St. Bonaventure out there in Florida. Northern Iowa, 1.5 point underdog. Total on this game, 137.5. With the Bonnies, I made them a 3 point favorite. So going to be willing to lay the 1.5 for Northern Iowa. This unit, I feel like, is starting to play a little bit more slowly, a little bit more defense oriented, like when they were able to have so much success about a decade ago, year in and year out, making the NCAA tournament. But don't think that it's going to be enough against this unit in St. Bonaventure that does a nice job not turning the ball over a ton. For Northern Iowa, they just don't have a ton from the outside. You got Titan Anderson, who's able to do a good job down low, being able to give you 6 rebounds per game, but not really a guy that's going to give you a lot of versatility at 6'6". They are still really looking for, I guess you'd call it that primary facilitator, as Leon Bond comes in from Virginia. He's been able to give this team about 8 points, 5 rebounds per game, but it's not necessarily an amazing shooter. Trey Campbell is someone that's able to give you about 3 assists, 4 boards, 8 or so points per game, but feels like they're still looking for a few answers And then on the flip side for St. Bonaventure, the team did a really nice job holding in there against Utah State yesterday. Now, unfortunately for myself, I had laid the number with Utah State, and they were able to claw their way back into it, but Melvin Council is a nice jitterbug, do-it-all guy with 13 points, 12 boards. Yesterday, he plays bigger than his size would indicate. You've got a guy in Deshaun Bowen who comes over from Iowa, is able to give you 3+ assists per contest, and then Chance Moore, he does give you more. He's able to give you about 15.5 points. Hasn't shot it amazingly from three-point range, but a block and a steal per contest. This St. Bonaventure team just plays a lot of really good positionless basketball, with Noah Brown doing a nice job just walling things off down low. I do think that St. Bonaventure finds a way to get the job done here against Northern Iowa, so I did set my line at 3. I'm going to be willing to lay that very small number, and with regards to total, set mine at a 139. You've got a Bonnie's team that I think is going to be pretty efficient with the ball, and this is a Northern Iowa team that they themselves do give up a few too many looks from three-point range, so going to be looking at the over in this ordeal, and I'm willing to lay up to 2.5 with the Bonnies, 885, 886 on the betting board. This is from Tempe, Arizona. Northwestern is going to be playing against UNLV. You've got no numbers up on this game, but I've got my handicap as I set Northwestern as a 3.5 point favorite with a total of 135.5, so 135 or less, and on the over 136 or higher, the under end. For Northwestern, willing to lay up to 3 with them. 4 more taking the points with the UNLV. Less than savory efforts from both of these teams yesterday, though. I was much more heartened by what I saw at Northwestern, as they did a relatively solid job on the glass. They won the turnover battle, but they just weren't able to hit too many shots yesterday. You're going to be needing Mr. Martinelli to be able to pick it up after yesterday. He just gave you a big giant nothing burger, with Nick Martinelli entered into yesterday with 23+ points per contest, just 7 points. Did still give the team 8 rebounds per game, and Brooks Barnheiser, he's been able to do a very good job since coming back off of injury. He's been able to average north of 18 points, about 7.5 boards, 3+ assists per game last year with a 35% three-point shooter. We've seen that go downward a little bit, and for Northwestern, they go just 4 of 16 from three-point range yesterday, but for this UNLV team, they just got completely bludgeoned in every facet of the game yesterday against Mississippi State. Do think that you're going to see a better effort here. Still have down low guy that's able to give you about 7 rebounds per game in Jeremiah Terry, and I do think that Dedrin Thomas, who has been able to give the team 16 points, entered into yesterday shooting north of 50% from 3, which you knew was going to fall off a little bit. He's still going to be able to do a nice job running the show for this team, but for this UNLV bunch, they're very reliant upon generating turnovers. Northwestern, even though they're not quite as efficient as they were a season ago, but still doing a pretty rock-solid job of not turning the ball over a lot. And for this UNLV team, they have been able to generate about 8.5 steals per game. You've got Jalen Bedford, who needs to step up a little bit more, but he's been able to give the team about 8 points per game. This is certainly a UNLV team that they can't overcome a ton of size. We saw that yesterday against Mississippi State, but this is a Northwestern team that, outside of Matthew Nicholson, we pretty much named all the guys that are able to give you any sort of size and rebounding for this team. So it is a ordeal where at a 3 or less, I'm willing to lay with Northwestern. 4 more, take the points with UNLV. 2 relatively slow teams, and UNLV, it just feels like isn't necessarily firing on cylinders offensively. So 135 or less, and on the over 136 or higher, the under 887, 888 on the betting board. Butler and Mississippi State do battle, and with Mississippi State made them an 8-point favorite with a total of 144. So you're at a 7.5 or less, willing to lay with Mississippi State, 8.5 or more, taking those points with Butler, and then 143.5 or less, and on the over 144.5 or higher, the under. So massive question marks with Butler, who's been able to shoot well north of 35% from three-point range this season. They do bring back their top 2 scorers from a season ago, and Pierre Brooks along with Jamile Telford. These 2 guys 8 seasons ago both gave you 15+ points per contest, and for Telford, 23 points yesterday, just 2 from Pierre Brooks. But for this Butler unit, what is a question mark for them is what you're going to be able to get down low. Andre Screen was able to come off the bench. He had 9 boards, 3 blocks, 15 points, and he's a true 7-footer that's able to give you about 6 to 7 rebounds per game. But outside of that, you really don't have a ton. Patrick McCaffrey, he's been able to give you a little bit of versatility at about 6'9", 6'10", but still have my question marks there in terms of his three-point shooting of north of 40% being long-lasting. And for Mississippi State, we saw them just absolutely take the fight to UNLV yesterday. They won the battle down low. They have really improved their three-point shooting as well. Don't think that they're going to shoot as well from 3 as they did yesterday, but you've been able to have Joshua Hubbard supply the team with 19+ points per contest. Claudel Harris has been able to give you about 10 points. He's a mid-30s career three-point shooter with a little bit of size size and versatility. Riley Kugel is coming along for the ride as well. We saw some great flashes from him a few seasons ago when he was over at Florida. This year, shooting less than 30% from three-point range, but I do think there's some upside there with him as well. And then Kanye Cleary, if he's able to duplicate what he did last season over at Penn State when he was at Penn State last year, 16.5 points, high 30s three-point shooter, you're really looking at a Mississippi State team that can dominate teams, and they've been very efficient with the ball. Mississippi State turned the ball over less than 10 times per contest. I do think that they go out there and they're able to get the job done against a Butler team that I still think is relatively so-so. It's a Butler team that has been able to emerge offensively, getting to north of 70 points now in each of their last 4 games, and this is a Mississippi State team that, while they do hang their head on defense, offensively they've been able to burst out as well. So at a 143.5 for less, in on the over 144.5 for higher, the under, and then want to lay up to 7.5 with Mississippi State, 8.5 or more taking those points with Butler. And then this one has no numbers up on the board. 889, 890 is Arizona State and St. Mary's. They're doing battle from the great state of California, but I've got my handicap. St. Mary's, I said, as a 2.5 point favorite, so want to lay up to 2 with them, 3 or more taking the points with Arizona State, and then 136 or less in on the over, 137 or higher, the under for Arizona State. They looked very good last night against New Mexico. They have been able to show a lot more in terms of their shooting ability than they have in past years. It seems like they have finally been able to figure it out with regards to guards are able to put it in the basket. Also, Mason has been able to give you double figures. BJ Freeman has sort of been that do-it-all sort of guy that's able to give you 11 to 12 points per contest. Throw in there a few rebounds, but Bashir Jihad, who entered into yesterday shooting just 29.5% from 3, he's also been able to do a lot of that as well. At 6'9", 13 points, 6 boards, he's able to give you quite a bit of an outside force as well. But on the flip side, you've got a St. Mary's team that they absolutely put USC in a headlock yesterday. They held them to fewer than 40 points. Prior to that, St. Mary's was outside the top 125 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This is always a relatively slow and controlled team. And for Arizona State, this is a team that's looking to fly a little bit more. Other than that opening game against Idaho State, where neither team was able to get past 65, it has been a very much, shall we say, muted sort of team for them. But you've got Augustus Marisolinas for the St. Mary's team that has been able to do a nice job being able to give you north of 14 points per contest. Lots of good players down low for the team as well. And that's going to be hard for Arizona State to match up with. Arizona State last year outside the top 300 with regards to rebound rate, significantly better this season, but I still have a few question marks as to how they're going to be able to hold up down low with Mitchell Saxon being able to give you 7+ rebounds per game. And then you've got Paulias Mirosikis, who's been able to give you about 9 to 10 rebounds per game, 14 points per contest. Good versatility out of him, as last year I actually shot north of 50% from 3-point range in a small sample size there. You've also been able to have Joe Ross be able to emerge for this team. Actually, Jordan Ross be able to give you about 8.5 points per contest for the St. Mary's team. He was the top scorer yesterday for this bunch. For a St. Mary's team that isn't the world's greatest in terms of their 3-point shooting, but certainly have been able to gain some versatility. So 136 or less in on the over, 137 or higher the under. Want to lay up to 2 with St. Mary's, 3 or more taking the points with Arizona State. And then this is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. This is 891, 892. New Mexico faces off against USC. I'm willing to lay up to 4.5 with New Mexico in this spot, 5.5 or more taking the points with USC, and semi-total at 153. So 152.5 or less in on the over, 153.5 or higher the under. New Mexico playing at one of the fastest paces in all of college basketball, but also saw USC fail to get past 40 points yesterday. Do think that for USC, this is going to be a harebrained team because we saw them play a game in the 90s against UT Arlington just a week ago as well. And this is a New Mexico team that has been able to do a relatively solid job against outmatched competition on defense. They've been able to give up 68 points or fewer, and now 3 out of their last 6 games. And for New Mexico, they're able to control things down low. With LU Jr. Joseph entered in yesterday, 14 points, 10 boards, 2.5 blocks per contest. And USC just is finding no rebounding whatsoever. They have no idea how to be able to crash a glass. Josh Cohen has been able to give the team right around about 10 or so points per contest, but really not giving you a lot down low. St. Thomas has had to do a little bit of everything. He's giving you about 9 points, 5 boards, 5 assists, so do like that versatility. And Terrence Williams going into yesterday was averaging 13.5 points, 4.5 boards, held to just 1 point yesterday. Matt Nolan is giving you absolutely nothing down low as well. And this is a USC team that went 0 of 12 from 3-point range yesterday. That should be going northward a little bit. You've got guys like a Chibuzo Agbo, who last season when he was over at Boise State shot north of 40% from 3-point range. So I do think that you get a better effort here from a USC team that, for their credit, they have not turned the ball over a ton, less than 10 turnovers per contest, but this is a New Mexico State team that they crank it up tempo. And I will say for New Mexico, they are turning the ball over about 13.5 times per contest. So it's a spot where on a 152.5 or less in on the over, 153.5 or higher, the under, 1 to lay up to 4.5 with New Mexico, 5.5 or more, taking those points with the USC. And now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-623, 306-624. It is Alcorn State playing against South Alabama. South Alabama is a favorite of 17.5 points. Total on this game is 133, and set my line at 14.5. So I'm going to be willing to take the points with Alcorn State. For Alcorn State, it's been a less than savory start to the season, but I just really don't love what I'm seeing out of the South Alabama team either. For South Alabama, they don't necessarily have a ton of rebounding. You've got John Broome, not to be confused with Johnny Broome, who's been able to give you about 6-7 rebounds per game. They're still without Maxwell Land, who's been out since really the beginning part of the 2023-24 season. And then for Alcorn State, it's been a hodgepodge of different guys. They've got like 10 different guys that they rotate in tandem with. Nobody really being able to give you north of 8 points per game. You've been able to get right around about 5 or so rebounds per game down low out of Dahaji Beno. He's a 6'7", little bit of a combo player that's been able to step up for the team a bit down low. And for Alcorn State, they just seem to be able to find their bearings in terms of just a little bit more clean flowing offense. 14 turnovers per game. That's been a little bit rough, but they seem to have found their main point guard in Michael Pahad, who doesn't really give you a lot in terms of scoring, but has given out 3.7 assists, so about 2.5 turnovers per game. He's starting to command more minutes. He's been able to give you a little bit of something down low, nice positionless sort of player for this team. And then you've been able to get Marcus Tankersley going a little bit more as well after he was a 14-point per game scorer over at Detroit season ago as well. For South Alabama, Miles Corey has been rock solid with 18.5 points per contest and dishing out 5 assists per game, but he also turns the ball over about 3 times per contest as well. For Alcorn State, they really have not approached 60 in each of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, you've got a South Alabama team that they themselves have been able to get past the 75-point plateau in 3 of their last 4 games, but they're a team that as well has a few question marks around them. I did set my total at 140. I do think that South Alabama is going to be able to give you some scoring. I do think that Alcorn State really starting to be able to find a little bit more of their bearings as well. So I'm in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to take those points with Alcorn State. 306-625, 306-626. It is Colgate taking on Appalachian State. App State a 1.5-point underdog. Total on this game is 135. Felt like Appalachian State should have been the favorite. I set them as a 4-point favorite, so I'm in on them outright on the money line. This will be another write-up that I've got for the VSiN.com article. And with regards to this Colgate team, just not the same team that we've seen in past years, as right now they're as a collective shooting less than 33% from three-point range. For Appalachian State, they got completely destroyed by Wisconsin earlier in the season, but their defense has been able to come back in full force, giving up 63 points or fewer in 2 out of their last 3 games, with the lone exception a William & Mary team being a team that's playing up tempo. You've got Miles Tate, who's been able to give the team 14.5 points, a little bit over 4 assists per contest. Love what I'm seeing out of him. And for Appalachian State, CJ Hundley has really good versatility out there with 14 points, 6 boards at 6'11". He's currently shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range. You just don't right now have that with this Colgate team, as Parker Jones right now leading the way with about 10.5 points per contest. It's just a big giant hodgepodge for a Colgate team that is used to having that one dominant player. They just don't have that this far this season. Have a little bit of versatility out of Brady Cummins, who's been able to chip in there 10 points, 4 boards, 2 assists. But for Colgate, even though they've been clean with their possessions, they're not necessarily doing a great job of being able to shoot from three-point range. You don't have a lot of rebounding outside of Jeff Woodyard, who's able to give you about 5.5 or so rebounds per game. Colgate, one of the worst teams at generating second chance opportunities in all of college basketball, with their three-point shooting percentage way down. And you've had guys like Jackson Threadgill step in for Appalachian State, start to lend a little bit more in the backcourt. I do think that App State finds a way to be able to get the job done outright on the money line, so I do like Appalachian State on the money line, and did set my total at a 136 as well. I do think the Colgate is going to start to creep up a little bit more with their three-point shooting, and Appalachian State starting to play a little bit more up-tempo. Keep in mind, this game out there in the great state of North Carolina as well, so that's pretty close to Boone, North Carolina, where Appalachian State is based, so like App State on the money line, and here at the 135, do like the over. 306-627, 306-628. This is from the Palestra. You've got Elon and Maine doing battle. Maine hopes to not get Maine as 3 to 3.5 point underdogs, and your total is 137. And did set my line at a 2 for Maine, so I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line. I felt like they should be the favorite. For Elon, their three-point shooting has been very nice, and they had that great win over Notre Dame about a week and a half ago, but still do have some question marks as to what you're going to be able to get in terms of taking care of the ball, and that's where Maine really thrives. Maine is one of the better teams at all of college basketball at being able to generate turnovers, and now they get to go up against an Elon team that certainly is going to be able to win the battle down low. You've got someone in 6'11" Sam Sherry, State was able to give you 6+ boards per contest and has really good versatility. He's been able to chip in their double figures from 3-point range thus far this season. He's been shooting about 38.5% from the outside, and for Elon as a whole, they shoot 38% from 3-point range. Matthew Van Coleman, he is 7'4", and he's been able to find himself a little bit more down low. 3.5 blocks, 7.5 boards per contest. Been a little bit in and out of the full, but when he's been out there, he's been able to do a really nice job. And then you've got a pair of Simpkins in TK and TJ Simpkins, who are both giving you 16 and 17 points per game, respectively. But for Maine, even though they don't have so much flash with this team, you've got AJ Lopez, who's been able to give you 14 points per contest. He's shooting about 40% from 3-point range. For Maine, they do turn the ball over about 12.5 times per contest, but they're generating 8.5 steals per game. Kellen Tynes 2 seasons ago led all of college basketball in terms of just steals per game. You've got Christopher Mantis, who comes on over from Appalachian State. He's got a bit of size at 6'7". He's able to give you some rebounding. Career 34% 3-point shooter, so do like that versatility that you're able to see out of him. I do think that Maine, one of the better teams at being able to guard the 3-point arc, are going to be able to do a solid job of holding in this game with that. And Keon Burns, 6'6", 2-all player, coming in from Long Island, 12.7 boards per contest, I think is going to be the X factor. Has done a nice job being able to generate some turnovers of his own for this Maine team. They have yet to really give up north of 70 points in a game all season long, since perhaps opening night. Meanwhile, this has been an Elon team that has been sort of hit or miss with regards to their 3-point shooting, and they've had a rough time on defense as well. Do think that both of these teams hit a few threes, so I set my total at 140. Do like the over, and with Maine, like them outright on the money line. 36-629, 36-630. Binghamton is going to be playing against Niagara, and Niagara does find themselves as a 1.5 point favorite. Total on this game is 138.5, and for Niagara, set them as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the very small number with Binghamton. They've got a guy that I really like in Tim Uchenry, who's been able to generate for the team right around about 12 to 13 points per contest, has some good versatility, but I just don't think that they're going to be able to hold up against a bunch of Niagara, who's got a very versatile player in Aldudun, who's been able to give you 13.5 points, a little bit over 4.5 rebounds per game. Now, on the flip side, you've got Garrett Walsh, who's been able to give you about 10 rebounds per game for Binghamton. He should be able to win that battle down low. But Jaden Marshall gives you 11 points, 4 boards, and Niagara, one of the best teams at being able to shoot from 3-point range away from home. Since the beginning of the 2023-24 season, has collective shooting about 38% from 3-point range. Jalen Martinez, who comes on over from UC Riverside, he gives you 6'11" size. He's able to give you about 4 rebounds per game. They're looking a little bit more to Zion Russell as well. A little bit more of a, shall we say, glue guy that's able to give you 5 points per game. And then they've also got the Valparaiso transfer, who's been amazing from 3-point range. Jahari Williams, who's giving you 13 points, currently shooting 50% from 3-point range, 12+ points in 4 out of the last 5 games. So love what I'm seeing there. And this is a Binghamton team that last year they were one of the worst teams from 3-point range in all of college basketball. Thus far this season, they've had still a little bit of a tough time getting it going in terms of their offense, because even though the 3-point shooting has been much better, shooting about 36% from 3-point range, with Ben Callan Gold being able to lead the way with 13 points, shooting 39.5% from 3, 15 turnovers per game. That's been a little bit of an issue. And while Walsh should be able to be the best rebounder in this game, nobody else outside of him really giving you north of 5 rebounds per game. And Jason Bengini, the transfer that comes over from Sono, has missed 5 games already. So I do like Niagara in this spot, set them as a 4.5 point favorite, and did set my total at 146.5. Do think that both of these teams get it going from 3-point range, and Binghamton is going to have a little bit of a cleaner look at the basket than normal, as Niagara, not a team that generates a ton of turnovers. So looking at the over, and I'm going to be looking at Niagara laying that small number, 306-631, 306-632. It is Sam Amford, and they're going to be playing against West Georgia. West Georgia is a 19.5 point underdog. Still on this game between 156 and 156.5. I set Sam Amford as a 25.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Samford has had a few close calls thus far in this tournament. I think they take it to the newest Division I team in West Georgia that's in just so much transition after last year. Zahari Williams was able to be a really nice player for the team. He's out over at New Mexico State. He was a heart and soul guy that was able to give you 20+ points per contest. Without him in the fold, you're just looking for answers at this point, and now they have to go up against the Samford team that's one of the best in all of college basketball at being able to generate turnovers. Shelton Williams-Dryden has been able to supply 16.5 points, 7.5 boards for this West Georgia team, and you've had Demetrius Johnson step up, give the team a little bit of facilitation, but you really don't have close to anyone that has seen meaningful D1 experience on this roster. They're shooting 28% from 3-point range. You really don't have anyone other than Williams-Dryden that gives you north of 4 rebounds per game, and this is the same for a team that typically they lose the battle on the glass, but now with Colin Holloway giving you 5 rebounds per game, he's probably the best low post piece that you've got. You've got AJ Allenpatch, who stands right around about 6'9", 6'10", really good versatility with Allen's patch. He's shooting 57% from 3-point range, and as a matter of fact, for Samford, out of your top 5 scores, 4 of them are shooting north of 45% from 3. The lone exception, Trey Ford, a former top 5 junior college transfer according to JUCORecruiting.com from 2 seasons ago, throwing their Ryland Jones, giving you 6.5 assists to fewer than 2 turnovers per contest, and this team generating 12 steals per game. I think that it spells doomsday for West Georgia. I set my total at 161.5. I do think that this game gets cranked up tempo and that Samford is able to turn those steals into offensive buckets. So, like the over, and I'm willing to lay it with Samford. 306, 633, 306, 634. It is Virginia, and they're going to be playing us Holy Cross. Another game that made my write-up says Virginia is a 16 to 16.5 point favorite. Totals between 129 to 129.5. I wrote up the under, willing to take this to 125.5 or less with this Virginia unit. They're just not giving you a lot on offense. Well outside the top 200 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Number 1 in the country in terms of total possessions per game as well. So they've done a really good job of being able to slow things down to a crawl. And then this Holy Cross unit, they're outside the top 150 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis as well. Been able to get a little bit more out of Max Green, who's been able to supply the team with about 12.5 points per contest, 5 boards, and it's a Holy Cross team that is shooting about 38% from 3-point range. But for as bad as Virginia Tech has been on offense, on defense, they're still a relatively rock-solid team. You've got a Holy Cross team that doesn't necessarily dominate. Down low, you've got a guy in Joe Nugent who's got 6'6" size. He's been able to give you 11 points, 5 boards per contest. And then Jaden Farrow, he's been able to step up with about 7.5 rebounds per game. He gives you nothing on the offensive side of things, but does a good job of being able to pound down low. And then you just need a little bit more out of TJ Power for this Virginia team. Comes in after being a former top 50 recruit and just has given the team nothing whatsoever after he was at Duke last season. Andrew Rohde has been able to give you better facilitation. He gets the ball to Isaac McNeely, and McNeely 13.5 points, shooting north of 50% from 3. And Andrew Rohde shooting 46.5% from the outside, 9.5 points per contest. But even though Virginia plays so slowly, they're turning the ball over darn near 13 times per contest. They've been able to shoot nearly 40% from 3-point range, but leave a lot to be desired there. Should be able to win the battle down low. Jason Kofi as a freshman, 9.7 boards per contest, and Blake Buchanan has stepped up a little bit as well. He's giving you a little bit north of 5 boards and a block and a half per contest, but I think that this is going to be a defense-oriented, slow, grimy game. Did set my line at a 19 for Virginia. I do think that they take it to a Holy Cross team that I just think is an inferior team, so I'm going to be willing to lay it with Virginia. And with regards to the total, I'm taking it under and wrote that up for the VSiN article. 306, 635, 306, 636. It is Navy, and they're going to be playing on the road against Penn. Penn finds themselves as 5.5 point favorites. This game is between 144.5 to a 145, and set Navy as a 1 point favorite. I like them outright on the money line. I've just not liked what I've seen out of this Penn team thus far this season. Even at home against Maryland Eastern Shore, they very nearly lost that game outright on the money line. And for this Navy team, it is very much a whole is greater than some of its parts approach when it comes to being able to generate turnovers, when it comes to being able to lock down on defense. You've got a guy that certainly is able to lead this team down low, and Donovan Draper last year was able to give the team 8+ boards per contest. He's been able to do a rock-solid job along with Aiden K. Howe, who he's been able to give the team 8.5 rebounds per game. I'll be able to lock things down there. And then you do have a nice primary scorer who's been able to supply the team with 18.5 points, 4.5 assists, and Austin Mangini for a Navy team that still struggles quite a bit from 3-point range, shooting just 31.5% from the outside, but you've been able to have a lot of these other guys be able to step up, give you some good production in the backcourt. You got another guy that comes back from a season ago in Linsander Rystorm, who's been able to give you about 6 points per game last season. He was one of the better 3-point shooters at about 38.5%. Hasn't seen necessarily that uptick thus far this season, but for this Penn team, they've been a little bit wobbly in the backcourt, though Ethan Roberts, who knows all about military institutes, he comes on over from Army. He's been able to do a nice job logging for the team about 13.5 points, 5 boards, shooting 35% from 3-point range, and Penn overall, they're just shooting 32% from 3, 38% from the floor. You expect a lot more from them offensively. They've cleaned up the turnovers, only turned the ball over about 11.5 times per contest, but this is also one of the worst teams in terms of generating turnovers as well. Nick Spinoza, staying 6'8", good versatility, 3 assists, 5.5 boards, 7 points per contest, but you really don't have a lot of size with regards to this team as well. Have been able to get about 5 points and 5.5 rebounds per game as well out of Augustus Gerhardt, but I do have my question marks with this Penn team. I do think that Navy going to do a nice job generating turnovers to be able to get the job done outright on the money line. So I'm willing to lay up to 1 with Navy, and did set my total 139. The overall offensive execution for Penn really has not been there, and this is a Navy team that's looking to slow down quite a few of their games. They had a few less than savory results towards the middle of November, so do think that they're going to look to slow this down. So looking at the money line of Navy and the under 306, 637, 306, 638. Lafayette is going to be playing us to Long Island. Long Island, 4.5 to 5 point underdogs. Settles between 142.5 to 143, and with Lafayette, set them as a 3.5 point 3-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Long Island. We were talking about this with our good friend Joe Budzelek, the fact that Long Island just looks like a completely different team this season. They've been able to cut down the turnovers to fewer than 11.7 per contest. You have a few pieces that are a little bit banged up for the team, but Malachi Davis, he might be the best player in the NEC. Comes on over from Arizona State, 19 points, 3.5 assists, shooting 40% from three-point range. As a unit, it's a Long Island team that's shooting about 33% from three. You need a bit more down low because Terrell Strickland and his 5.5 rebounds per game, that's really one of the main guys that's leading the way. So you've also been able to get about 6.5 rebounds per game out of Cedric Lassou. He missed 2 games to begin the season, but should be good to go in this one, but has been very much a yo-yo sort of player in the last 4 games. He has had 11, 4, 10, and 1 rebound, so don't know what you're going to be able to get out of him night in, night out. Not like you've got amazing rebounding with this Lafayette team either, as Misha Bestonston, he's been able to give you about 8 rebounds per game. He's been able to lead the way with that regard, though. You do have Justin Vanderbond, the true 7-footer who began his career over at Boston College. He's been able to give the team about 8 points, 2.5 assists, a block per contest. Problem is, he's only been out there for 2 games thus far this season. He's currently dealing with an injury, which is why you've got such a better chance down low if you're Long Island. In this one, Caleb Williams, he has stepped up for the Lafayette team. He's been able to give you 10 points per contest. You do have to like what you're seeing out of TJ Berger as well, being able to give you about 6 to 7 points per contest as well. But that Justin Vanderbond injury, very big in this one. This is Lafayette's own tournament, but I think that Long Island is going to be able to hold in there. Lafayette, slow and controlled team, but they shoot about 35.5% from three-point range. Long Island, they're still a little bit of an up-tempo team, and they still leave something to be desired with their perimeter defense, as shown through with them giving up 76-plus points in each of their last 4 games. So did set my total more around to 143.5. Do think that this is close enough for late game felling, so in on the over and the points with Long Island. 306, 639, 306, 640. Belmont is going to be playing against Gardner Webb. Gardner Webb does find themselves as 6.5-point underdogs. Settles between 150.5 to 151.5, and with Gardner Webb, made them an underdog in this case of 4.5 points. So seeing what we've got right now with the 6.5, I'm going to be willing to take it with Belmont. It's a unit that has been able to do a nice job offensively, but again, a team that's outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and a team in a lot of transition. They lose pretty much 4 of their top 5 scorers from a season ago. Carter Witt, who comes on over from Furman, he's a nice facilitator. He's able to give you north of 3 assists per contest, putting in their double figures for them. But this Gardner Webb team is built very, very stout in terms of the interior, as you've been able to get 8+ rebounds per game out of Isaiah Richards, and on top of that, Anthony Selden, who was over at Rice last season, 2 seasons ago, was a double-figure scorer for Gardner Webb. He's come right back, and he's been able to give the team 17 points, 4 boards. Now, it's not a Gardner Webb team that necessarily has a lot of 3-point shooting, but you actually saw Richards last season at 6'10", shoot 36.5% from 3-point range. Hasn't quite shown that off thus far this season, as his scoring has been limited. He's only been able to give the team about 5.5 points per contest, but got Daryl Simmons, who's been able to dole out some nice efficient offense. And for Belmont, Isaiah Walker has been a little bit of a do-it-all sort of guy. 11 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, a steal per game, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range at 6'5". He's been able to give you some nice size as a primary facilitator. And then I like the D2 transfer in Jonathan Pierre. Spent last year at Memphis, just couldn't get out there on the floor. He was a part of that Nova Southeastern team that won the Division II national title 2 seasons ago at 6'9". He's shooting 42+% from 3-point range, logging for the team, 7 boards, 12.5 points. So he's able to do a tremendous job on that front for a Belmont team that they keep things relatively clean. They turn the ball over 11.5 times per contest. They shoot 39% from 3-point range. Gardner Webb has always had their issues at the free throw line, but this is a Gardner team that's really doing a nice job locking down with regards to their defense. Fewer than 70 points allowed each of their last 3 games. For this Belmont team, they've been able to do a tremendous job with their offense. So sort of a strength-on-strength matchup. I did set my total at a 152.5. I do think that this comes down to late game felling, and I do think that Gardner Webb going to be able to find some holes in this Belmont defense, and Gardner Webb not necessarily playing as slowly as they used to. They hired from within, so they're looking to be able to sort of restore the roar that they once had with Jeremy Luther at the helm. But that said, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Gardner Webb, and at a 152 or less, I'm in on the over. 306, 641, 306, 642. North Florida hits the road to face off against SIU Edwardsville, and Edwardsville is a 3.5-point underdog total on this game between 149.5 to a 150, and for Edwardsville, set them as just a 1.5-point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Don't necessarily want them outright on the money line. We've seen this North Florida team be able to pull out plenty of road games thus far this season, including 2 against power conference foes in Georgia Tech along with South Carolina, but this is also a North Florida team that they live and die by the three. Last year, they were the only team in all of college basketball that took north of 50.5% of their shots from three-point range, as they took right around about 52.5% of their shots from three-point range. Now they go up against an SIU Edwardsville team that they've always been a little bit hit or miss on the defensive side of things, but I do think that they're going to be able to do a relatively solid job of holding up here. They're allowing opponents to shoot 34.5% from three-point range. Not a great percentage, not a bad percentage, and then for North Florida, just don't necessarily have a ton of size down low. Been able to have Josiah Miles, who's saying 6'6", give you about 12 points, 7 boards, a little bit over 2 assists per game as well. And then they've got a duo-all player in Josh Harris, who's been able to come in as a freshman, give the team 14.5 points, supplying the team with north of 6 boards. He's been able to shoot 50% from three-point range himself as a team. North Florida shooting 38.5% from three. They've been efficient, only turning the ball over about 9.5 times per game, with Liam Murphy, who was over at Columbia a few seasons ago, 6'7" stretch player, giving you 14 points per game. He's been able to refine his stroke, but the best guard out there on the floor might be Rayshon Taylor. 5 boards, 6 assists, 16.5 points per game for this Edwardsville team. It's been a career mid-30s three-point shooter, and for Edwardsville, they do turn the ball over 12 times per contest, but they go up against a North Florida team that really doesn't pressure the SU, and while North Florida is a very good team in terms of their own three-point shooting percentage, they also give it up as well. When they've been away from home, they've allowed opponents to shoot 40% from three-point range, so should be some open looks here for this SIU Edwardsville team that has had a lot out of Brian Taylor, has been able to give you 12 points, 4 boards, 2 assists per contest. He's currently shooting 60% from three. Should see a little bit of drop-off there, but with the likes of Miles Thompson being able to step up as well, and just this entire SIU Edwardsville team being able to do a great job of being able to crash the glass. Right now, you've got essentially 7 different guys giving you at least 3.9 rebounds per game. That should keep them lively. I do think that North Florida, in the end, just has just enough to be able to pull this one out, but at north of 3, going to be 1 take the points, and did somebody total out of 147. If you've got an Edwardsville team that has really been slowing down their tempo. So looking at the under in this spot, and I'm going to be willing to take those points with SIU Edwardsville 3 of 6-6-43, 3 of 6-6-44. Clemson is going to be playing against the Florida A&M. A&M, an underdog of 31.5 points. So this game between 141.5 to 142, and I did set this line at a 32.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Clemson, willing to go up to 32 with them. As for Clemson, I do think that they dominate. Has truly been one of the worst teams in all of college basketball this far this season. It's a Florida A&M team that I do think has a little bit of upside with some of their pieces. Like you've got Sterling Young, who comes on over from Charlotte, who's been able to give you 13 points per contest, and this coaching staff comes on over from the NAIA level. They were at St. Thomas last season, where they were preaching good defense. Just don't have a lot of size down low. You've got Shakir O'Neal, that's actually the son of Shaquille O'Neal, along Jermaine Charles, who are combining for about 9 rebounds per game, and they're really the only 2 guys on the roster, giving north of about 3.5 rebounds per game for Florida A&M. Just too sloppy with the ball as well. 15.5 turnovers per game, going up against a Clemson unit that is going to be able to just dominate down low. Ian Shefflin, 11 boards, 13.5 points per game. Victor Locken has good versatility as well, 11 points, 5.5 boards, comes on over from Cincinnati, as an FC shown his full, I guess you call it, abilities quite yet, but it's a Clemson team that's shooting 40% from three-point range. That should be maintaining throughout this one. Dylan Hunter, he's been able to give the team 7 points. He's been able to do a nice job as an off-the-bench scorer. And then you've got a guy with all sorts of versatility in Jaden Zachary. He has shot 40+% from three-point range throughout his career. Last year at Boston College, had 4+ assists per game. He's helping out the primary scorer in Chase Hunter. He's been able to give the team 16.5 points per contest for Florida A&M with how rough they've been on defense, and they just have not been able to take care of the ball in general. It's an A&M team that against D1 competition, they have given up 84+ points in every one of their games this season. I do think that Clemson lays it on them. Set my total 144.5, so on the over and willing to lay up to 32 with Clemson. 36-6-45, 36-6-46. Manhattan is going to be playing against Lemoyne. Lemoyne is a underdog of 6 points. So on this game between 147 to 148, and with Manhattan, I did set them as a favorite of 3.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Lemoyne. Manhattan, a much improved team from a season ago, and I do like Will Snyder and what he's able to bring to the table. He's come in, he's been able to give this team right around about 6 or so rebounds per contest, but with Lemoyne, they just have a close greater than some of his parts sort of approach, as you've got a pair of guys in Oseifer Owens along with Dwayne Karama, who have been able to combine for 21 points per contest. Karama has been your top guy in terms of hitting the boards with about 5.5 rebounds per game, though Oseifer Owens missed the first few games of the season. Since he's been able to return, has been able to give the team about 6 boards per contest, has given out a combined 6 assists in the last 2 games as well. So little bit of upside there for a Lemoyne team that they're not quite the same three-point shooting team that they were a season ago, 30.5% from three-point range. They are turning the ball over about 15 times per game, but it's also a Manhattan unit that doesn't necessarily do the world's greatest job of being able to generate turnovers themselves, and they've had a bit of a tough time with regards to their defense as well. They have given up at least 74 points in each of their last 4 games, and that includes a game against Virginia. And when you're giving up 74 plus to Virginia, that's not going well for you. And you've got a few guys that are just sort of like shifty, trying to be able to find themselves, like Fraser Roxborough, who comes down over from the country of Australia. 8 points, 4.5 boards, been shooting 47% per three, and all in all, Manhattan shooting 36.5% from the outside. Think that that's going to dry up a little bit, like what Jaden Winston is able to bring to the table. 4 assists, steal and half per contest, shooting 40% from three-point range, but I do think the Lemoyne going to be able to do a solid job hanging in there against a Manhattan team that, outside of Snyder, doesn't necessarily have a ton on the glass. It feels like a bunch that they themselves are going to have their tough times being able to take care of the ball with about 12.5 turnovers per game. So we'll take those points with Lemoyne. With the total, did some mine at a 147.5, so between a 147 to a 148. Personally, would rather take the 148 under rather than the 147 over. So in on the under and the points with Lemoyne 3-6-5-47, 3-6-5-48. Louisiana Monroe is going to be playing against Stephen F. Austin. Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin is a 4.5 point favorite. Total is 129.5. Main Stephen F. Austin a 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be able to take the points with Monroe. Typically, I would default to Stephen F. Austin. They're just high octane style, being able to generate so many turnovers. This is just not the same team this season, though. And for Louisiana Monroe, while you really don't have a ton in the backcourt whatsoever, this is a team that does a very good job in the front court, being able to grab rebounds against a Stephen F. Austin team that they've got Nana Ati-Bosiko, who's been able to give you 8 rebounds per game, but outside of that, you really don't have a lot of other guys other than Krishan Christmas, who's been able to give you 7 boards per contest of hitting the glass. These are your main 2 guys there, and for Stephen F. Austin, they're turning the ball over 24.5 times per game and shooting 59% at the free throw line. At some point, you need to do the little things. Recognize that Louisiana Monroe never been a great three-point shooting team, but they're up to about 32.8% this season after being a bottom team in terms of that regard last season. It's been all about Jalen Bolden and what he's been able to provide. Pair of assists, 5.5 boards, 13 points per contest. Really the lone guy on the team that's able to give you double figures, but Tyrese Watson, Jacob Wilson, both of these guys give you about 8 points per contest. Wilson is currently shooting 44% from three-point range, so he's been able to rise up a little bit more with that regard. And you've got Watson giving out about 3.5 assists per game as well. This is also a really nice Monroe team in terms of generating steals, about 8.5 steals per contest. Jerry Ngogpot, he's been able to give you about 6 boards per game, even though Stephen F. Austin has a few dominating rebounders. They, once again, have a team that they just can't hold on to the ball. Right now for Stephen F. Austin, it's been an almighty slog for them to get points up on the board. And for this Louisiana Monroe team, they've done a really good job locking down with their defense, giving up 70 or fewer in 4 out of their last 5 games, the one exception coming up against a pretty good North Alabama team. So I do think that for Louisiana Monroe, they're going to do a nice job here. Now, I do think that Stephen F. Austin is going to do better than north of 24 turnovers per game. And Stephen F. Austin, they're always looking to crank up the tempo. They just have had a lot of inefficient possessions. I just think that the sheer amount of possessions that you get in this game, going to be able to send it over. Set my total at 135.5, so in on the over, but we'll take the points with Monroe. 36-6-49, 36-6-50. It is LSU, and they're going to be playing us in Northwestern State. Northwestern State, an underdog of 20 to 20.5 points. Still on this game between 142 to 142.5. Said LSU is a 21.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay with LSU. I actually really like what I've seen out of this Northwestern State team. Bunch of guys from the junior college level being able to rise up and being able to give you some good production, as Aiden Patterson is a former top 100 recruit of Oregon and Nevada who's been very versatile for this team. 12 points, 3.5 assists. He's a former top 10 player, according to JUCOrecruiting.com, from the junior college level, and then been able to get a little bit more in the backcourt as well, with having someone in John Sanders II stepping up from Coastal Carolina, giving the team double figures, and Dante Walker has really been the main man. Comes up from the non-D1 ranks, has played just 2 games thus far this season, but in the games that he's been out there, combined 29 points and just returned to the floor on Tuesday, so that's going to be an impact for them. Meanwhile, on the flip side for LSU, you've got Cam Carter, who comes over from Kansas State, and he's been a real good elevator in terms of his backcourt. 17 points per game, shooting 41.5% from 3. LSU as a collective shooting just 30.5% from 3-point range, but should be going northward. You've had Jordan Sears, who's come over from UT Martin, do a nice job of being able to step up a level. 3 assists, 14 points per game. You should be able to have a nice advantage down low as well with this team. Corey Chess has been able to give you 6.5 boards as a true freshman. You're able to get right around about 8 boards and good versatility out of Jalen Reed, who last season he was shooting in that neighborhood about 39.5% from 3. Currently shooting 66% from 3. Certainly that'll be going downward, but Even some like Derek Fountain when he's out there, as he's been dealing with a little bit of an injury, able to give you some rebounding as well. Northwestern State, I just don't think is going to be a matchup down low. Willie Williams is able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game, but with this Northwestern State team, just having a tough time being able to put the ball in the basket against D1 competition and regulation. 71 points or fewer in, I believe, now all but one of their games thus far this season, so I do think that this game is going to belong to LSU. Did semi-total at a 147. If you've got an LSU team that they love to bomb it from three-point range, they've been able to do a nice job in terms of just being able to get things cranked up tempo a little bit more. So I am in on the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 21 with LSU. 36-651, 36-652. It is Texas, and they are back to being a favorite as they're at home against Delaware State. Delaware State, a 32 to 32.5 point dog. Totals between 139.5 to a 140, and I did set my total 148.5. I do like the over. I do think that Texas is going to be in sort of a name their score sort of game, and this is a Delaware State team that year in and year out there in the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game. Delaware State does lose two of their top three scorers from a season ago, but they bring back Martez Robinson, 16.5 points, 6.5 boards, and Corey Perkins, after he was limited to just 3 games a season ago, he's been able to come back and he's been able to give the team some nice facilitation as well. 4 assists, 7.5 points per game. Problem is, you've really got a big three for the team and not really much else, as you've been able to have a pair of guys be able to give you double figures, and Kasim Watson, as you've got Kareem and Kasim Watson, a pair of guys that are able to do a nice job of being able to contribute for the team, and then Robert Smith has been able to give you 12 plus points per contest. Outside of that, not a ton. Olsen Andrews, he's saying 6'10", he's able to give you a little bit on the boards, but this has been a team that in their front court, they have been quite a bit banged up, as well as you've just not been able to get a lot in terms of being able to hit the glass from Ramon Somerville, who's only been able to give you about 3 rebounds per contest, and for Texas, they should be able to dominate there with Arthur Kaluma. His versatility, supplying the team with 14.5 points, 7.5 boards, is able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range over the past 2 seasons, and Texas has just been really efficient with the ball. Just 9 turnovers per game. Julian Larry hasn't necessarily given you a ton in terms of scoring, but 3.5 assists, less than a turnover and a half per contest, and Trey Johnson has been one of the best freshmen in all of college basketball, north of 21 points per game. Would like to see him do a little bit more on the glass, as Caden Shedrick has to do a lot down low, but he's currently shooting north of 40% from three-point range. I think that Texas just lays it on a Delaware State team that they're not providing a lot down low for Delaware State. Just 2 of their last 5 games have come against D1 competition, and they've been averaging in those games less than 60 points per game. So I do like Texas to be able to get the job done, though I do think that Delaware State going to be looking to crank up that tempo just a little bit more. So did set my total 148.5 in on the over, and I'm willing to lay with Texas. And we wrap things up with 3 of 6-6-53, 3 of 6-6-54. UC Santa Barbara plays host to Mississippi Valley State. Delta Devils are a 31.5 point underdog. Total on this game is 134.5. Set my line at 31. So 31.5 is a minimum buy point on Mississippi Valley State, but I'm going to be willing to take Mississippi Valley State. This is a UC Santa Barbara team that I still have a few question marks on. They were actually less efficient with their defense when they were at home rather than when they were on the road. They were giving up about 7 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than on the road a season ago, and you had a lot of turnover in the offseason. Stephon Swenson is able to give you north of 4 assists per contest, comes in from the Atlantic Sun, like what he's providing. And Jason Fontenette, who last year he was a primary reserve with 5 points, 4 boards, he has been very good for this team, shooting 48% from 3, 15 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. But for Mississippi Valley State, I do think that they're going to show a little bit more heart, and Arthur Tate has been able to step up for the team, giving you north of 13 points per contest. You've got Donovan Sanders back from a season ago when he was a top 50 guy in terms of steals per game at the Division I level among qualifying players. Alvin Stradek, he's been able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game. Now, team is going to get absolutely mollywopped and bludgeoned down low by Kenny Poto, who's able to give you about 7.5 or so rebounds per game, and it's a Santa Barbara team that has good versatility from Colin Smith, about 9 points, 4 boards, shooting north of 40% from three-point range after coming in from Vanderbilt, but he's been missing the past few games just due to an injury. In general, he has not gotten out there in a little bit over a week. Missed that game against Eastern Washington a few days ago, so that cuts Mississippi Valley State a little bit of a break, as you've got a few guys for the Santa Barbara team that have been dealing with a few injuries. They've been having Zion Sensley in and out of the fold as well, so I do think that for Mississippi Valley State, they give you just enough in effort to be able to hold in there. And Ariel Bland, who was very good for the team a season ago, just 1.4 rebounds per game. Where the heck is this guy gone? So I'm going to be willing to take anything north of 31 with Mississippi Valley State, and what I think is going to be a low-scoring slog. Semi-total 133, so in on the under, and that'll wrap things up for the Friday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Big thanks to Joe Budzelek of StretchingTheFloor.blogspot.com for joining me in the live segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter Twitter/X timeline at GNN_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline and other ways find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, which means I'm back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
This is your before and after story. Prepare for an incredible career in nursing. At Southeastern College, experience expert hands-on training. Learn real-world skills in our professional lab and simulated settings. And train for opportunities as a practical nurse, registered nurse, or career advancement with our RN to BSN program. At Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sec.edu to get started.